Okay, everybody. This is the annual training portion of the November workshop. So you receive your commissioner guide. We'll send you that link. That link is always on the web page too. And we update it every year. We make sure that all the links in there are current, laws are current, everything. So that's really a go-to document. That's, I think, truly has all the training in it, in that it cites the relevant laws, walks through highlights of things, how the agency is structured, etc. But every year I cover a couple of highlights from that. Sometimes at the request, one of the items we're doing today is at the request of the chair, and then some I just pick and choose. So one that I chose, I'm going to do a little bit of a highlight on rules, not on rulemaking process, because I think for the most part you all know that, right? So rules are presented, you vote to recommend them, they get published, public comment, then they come back to you, you vote whether to adopt, not adopt, whether you want changes made. So I'm not gonna walk through that, though I just did very succinctly. But I wanted to talk more about, where's the wrong one? Okay. So the commissioners, which is you all, you are the outward-facing policymakers for the regulation of real estate services throughout the state of Texas. And some of the most impactful policy making that you do is through rule. And rule is something that I think not a lot of people outside of state agency world or federal agency world really know all that much about. I know you all know about it now because you've been in this world. But the rules are also probably the most impactful thing you do on individual license holders, right? So that is your outward facing policy. So when we look at rules, how do we get rulemaking authority? Unsurprisingly, it's through Chapter 1101, which is our chapter in the Occupations Code. So it gives the agency its general authority to regulate and rulemaking authority to implement the specific policies and processes to carry out its mission. So we've got this big statute that does have some specifics in it, right? Sometimes, you know, we'll point and we'll say, well, actually that's in statute, it's specifically in statute. But some of that is also more general of, you know, you have the authority to regulate real estate, I just lost the word for it, license holders, right? So you license, you have oversight over the education, et cetera. So the rulemaking authority gives you the authority to implement specific policies and processes. So a lot of times there's actually specific rulemaking authority that goes into that's referenced in the statute, right? The commission shall adopt rules X, Y, and Z. I think there's a free spot right there if you want it. So, and you know about that. And then sometimes it's a little bit more us setting up the processes in place to do the things we need to do, like a licensing process, right? It doesn't tell you exactly how to set up your licensing division or what they need to turn in order to get their broker's license. So that's typically done through rule, which you know, that part's pretty established. Sometimes we'll have new rules that come out. The ones that, you know, come off the top of my head are the timely response one that just passed, right? So that's a policy that you all made. It's outward facing. It definitely has impact on the day-to-day practice of agents and brokers. And we're hearing about that, right? Because they're feeling that one. Some of them they don't have any idea about because they don't matter as much because it's how the agency is really run, if you will. But some of the stuff like truly impacts their day-to-day. Education requirements, experience, what we determine to be active experience, things like that. APA, that's the Administrative Procedure Act. That's what covers that whole process that I just outlined, the rulemaking one, the posting and all that. That's for everyone who's doing rulemaking. Maybe not everyone, but so license holders have to follow the rules and they have the same effect as law. So if you're a license holder, there's not much difference between a rule and a law, right? And you saw that yesterday in that case. We had a rule violation and we had a statutory violation. There wasn't much to distinguish the two, right? Except that we had adopted a rule that was specific to those SOPs, where it was further clarified in detail. So in a lot of ways, more so than statute, the rules have the most impact, and that's what allows for the license holder's daily interaction with which maybe it's not daily, but their interaction with the agency is usually typically based in rule. So committees and rules. So this agency utilizes advisory committees as one method of examining the need for new and revised rules, right? So we've got a lot of committees. Broker lawyer committee is a little bit different, but that committee is completely in rule. All those contract forms are rules. They're just, so, for lack of a term, they're attached to a rule. And that's what allows for that public posting and the comment received, et cetera. But this commission utilizes advisory committees in a lot of different ways, right? And working groups and things like that. So the committees discuss issues and they sometimes specifically look at rules to determine whether they would recommend a change. Sometimes that's at the direction of the commission. Sometimes that's things that they're interested in and they want to focus on, right? Sometimes it's something that staff is asked to do. So ESAC right now is looking at the course outlines for updating. That's a staff request because we haven't done that in a little while. So that's where you're seeing like the new brokerage courses, but that brokerage course was also informed by feedback from the commission in that wanting a course that talked about the agent broker relationship and the importance of that and of each party knowing what to expect. But the commission is not bound to those recommendations. It has traditionally valued the input of committees in this area. So more often than not, because of the process it's gone through, how much vetting, there's commission liaisons, the rules seem to go. But I'll tell you, at my very first meeting, the contracts hour one was up, where it was the 3 hours for contracts. And I think the recommendation, I can't remember if it was a rule or if it was truly just a recommendation from ESAC. I've been there for 5 days, but it was a recommendation to add 3 hours. To add 3 hours to cover contracts into CE, which would have been, an increase of 3 hours of was it 18 that's required? And the commission did not like that at the time. They did not want that increase in hours. And so they sent ESAC back to the drawing board. And ultimately what came out of that was that you have 3 hours of contracts related courses required in your 18 hours. So the pushback is, that is, too much in terms of education hours for CE. It's, potentially creating more barriers. It wouldn't be a barrier to entry, it'd be a barrier to renewal, but that concept of like, that's too much, figure out a different way. And so you sent them back. And that's great. And that interaction was very good. We had a lot of people with opinions on that and they expressed their opinions on it. Providers, license holders, et cetera.
But Vanessa, that rule was also within statute because they changed the statute about 9 years earlier,
right,
where you could add hours every 2 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was within, but it was something that the commission didn't want to do at that time, right? And so if you get I know you know this, but if you get a committee recommendation, let's say, ESAC says, you know what, we think it should be 24 hours of, I don't know, I can't think of anything, interior design classes, so that you can show houses better, you can stage it, staging, that's the term. You don't have to say yes to that, right? You can completely thumbs down that recommendation if you want to, and you listen to the stakeholder feedback. Now the committees do a lot of that in their meetings, right? And we reposted rules, we pulled them when we saw that with unauthorized practice of law. Anyone who was on that group, there were a lot of feelings about one of the changes, and ultimately that change did not go through because of the stakeholder feedback. But I just note that broker lawyer is a little bit different. Broker lawyer is one where you either thumbs up, thumbs down on their recommendation. And so there's no room to edit, but there is certainly room to provide feedback as to why you do not like their proposed changes. And that most recently was in the change where we had the changes to paragraph 5. And I can't off the top of my head remember, but there was something in the language that did not go through. So the thumbs down, it went back for more discussion, deliberation.
Vanessa, also with respect to the legislation and the rules, I mean, they can't be in conflict, right? Obviously.
Correct. Right.
So the law always prevails and we conform to the law.
That's exactly right. And every time that we adopt a rule, we've got to reference what statute is giving us the authority to do that. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a more general one. Sometimes it's a very specific one, but you've always, any rule that you adopt has got to tie back to your authority and statute. And that's why we talk a lot about well, we don't have authority to do that. We can't, what's the one that came up yesterday? Builders. We have no authority over home builders, right? It's not in our statute. We don't regulate them. Right. So we can only act within what we have the authority to do. So that's a very good point. It's always got to tie back to that statute. So you guys utilize the committees. It seems like it's a very productive process, but ultimately it is in your hands at your vote. And so we know that stakeholder input's a really important part of rulemaking. This is a really active industry. There's a lot of feelings and opinions and people who want to be engaged, which is great, right? Because that means we do these rules don't go unnoticed. And I think we've all seen where they have not. So you'll see stakeholder input in public comment received, which is typically, it is reviewed by the appropriate committees. Every once in a while, there's a one-off. We had some yesterday where I reviewed it because it was, the concern was more of a legal concern and they just didn't have it right, or it was statutory. The language had to be in there. We couldn't make a change to it, et cetera. But typically it goes to the appropriate committee. Sometimes that's exec, sometimes that's enforcement. So it can be the committees that are here, the commission committees, but it's more often than not, it's gonna go to an advisory committee working group. So public comment is important. And you see it in your materials, but I'll say commission, if you're hearing chatter about rules or you want to know more about the rules that are going for proposal or even for adoption, because sometimes you'll hear us propose, you'll hear Abby propose it typically, and she's saying a lot of words in the moment, and maybe you want to know more about that prior to adoption. Then during that proposal period or even before, committee meeting minutes are such a great resource, and I talk about this a lot, but the way that Amber does those video minutes, you can just jump to the item and it will play the video part of that item. So if under agenda item 3, we were talking about a possible rule change to 535.2, you don't have to listen to the whole meeting part before that. You can click to that moment, which again, I'm still amazed by. And then we've got these committee meeting recaps that Summer does, Summer and Sierra. Those are really helpful too, and we always try and highlight the rule discussions in those. So it gives you a little bit of a summary, some taglines of hey, this is what they're working on, this is what they're looking at. We also have other articles, so we'll put out ones about contract form changes. We're seeing the business entity registration articles coming out right now. Clearly, we have a lot of communication to do on that. And a lot of work as from our conversation yesterday, but that's helpful, right? You're gonna know what the feedback is, you're gonna know what's happening, and that is great. We also, you've got it in your materials, you get a packet of rules, and it may seem like, I've already read 4 PFDs, and now I gotta go through all these rules. I'm not saying anyone has ever said that. But
We've all thought it.
Yeah, very good.
I'll wait for that presentation kind of a thing. But you've got the materials, you've got them in the materials. It shows you the changes, right? The specific parts that are changed. We do provide public comment once the rule is going for adoption. Also, we provide a summary, and the summary that we provide, we try not to be boring. I promise. What we tried to do is hit the high points of the changes. And I think this is particularly true as we start having more attendance from stakeholders of that's another way we can communicate. And so Abby and I always have a mind toward, okay, what do the commissioners need to know? What do stakeholders need to know when we do this presentation? Because they probably don't care that we added a comma to this or we changed, administrator to executive director, right? But they do care that they've now got to take 3 hours related to contracts. So we always try and hit the high points on that. Okay, that's rules. Cool. Okay. Questions, thoughts? No? Okay.
No, but don't all our rules go through the governor's office also?
Yes.
He gives it,
Right, there's a proposed rulemaking process. So it can go to the governor's office in 2 ways, actually. So it can go to Regulatory Compliance Division, which we've talked about, and that's where they're looking at sort of the barriers to, well, it's really more like the market impact. Are we creating barriers to entry with the rule? Are we potentially creating something that's unfair, the antitrust, things like that, right? So that's a little bit different, but that's what they can go through, and we cannot pass a rule that has gone to them without their approval. And that ties back to that North Carolina dental case that we talked about. The other way it goes is we do a proposed rulemaking memo, and we send them our proposed rules, and they take a look at them. Sometimes they provide, more often than not, I think they provide feedback of, yeah, you should have a comma here or this here, and then Abby's like, I don't know if that's right. And we're getting out our books, but we typically tend to go.
It gets super dorky around
Yeah, it gets
here.
real, yeah, everyone else leaves the office.
But last year before, we had rules moved to meetings because we could not get them through there.
We did, they were held for a while.
It wasn't significant things, but it was the process.
Well, it did end up ultimately having some impact that we hadn't calculated because we thought they were gonna go through at a time. So the expire process and the brokerage courses, like the requirements tied to that, actually did end up getting, implementation ended up getting complicated real fast. And we were like, well, why did we not contemplate this? And then it's like, oh, because we thought these were gonna go through in August and they didn't, and we would have had like more of a runway to get the implementation, so it does impact, and that does happen. That's the first time we've seen it go to that extent. Ultimately, they were released.
So for the memo, it's basically all proposed rules go through the governor's office for kind of this simple memo, simple review that sometimes turns complicated. But certain rules have to go through the Regulatory Compliance Division.
Yes. And we generally have an eye, well, we always have an eye on that when we're doing rulemaking, but they have an eye on it too. They actually go through the register.
So what's the point of distinction? How do you decide which one?
Well, we always do the proposed rulemaking memo to the governor's office. That's actually going to our policy analyst.
So that always goes now. Sometimes it goes to.
Right. If there's a potential that it's gonna have, generally antitrust implications, but like which is, that's
Like limits
the market competition. I say antitrust because that's what that North Carolina case dealt with ultimately, but yeah, so it's things like that. But interestingly, they, as much as like, we'll send something, there's a whole process for sending stuff to that Regulatory Compliance Division. That's just a division. It's not like our policy analyst where we send all the rules to, but they also follow the register. And so I've gotten calls from them where they're like, hey, this looks like it could be something. can you tell us a little bit more? Can you give us some data? And that way we can figure out if it's one that we do need to examine. So I know we've had at least one of those, and ultimately with the information that we gave them, they're like, no, you're good. But when we did the inspector education rule overhaul, that was very much an engaged process with them. I came in sort of at the 3/4 of the way through process on that. And that was my first experience of regulatory compliance.
Well, it probably depends on whose desk it lands on too, right?
100%. And the folks in regulatory compliance are pretty detail oriented, so they pick up on things. But they've also been very helpful, very nice. It's not a combative process, but we can't adopt until they're cool. Yeah, or sign off. That's what I'm gonna say. Okay. So not the most exciting, unless you're us, but really probably one of the most impactful things in terms of policy making that you do, and you are a policymaker. So just wanted to provide you with a little bit of information as it relates to that, what that process looks like, and where you can find more information if you need it. You can also always reach out to Abby and me. And it doesn't matter which one, because we will both scurry to each other's office and talk about it. Okay. So this is one that the chair has asked me to talk about. Don't worry, this isn't a super long presentation.
You'll be out of here by 5:30.
Yeah, this is like that meeting yesterday. I said to be over by noon. This is something I think you all receive emails, right? And they can be about anything. And I want to walk through some of the emails or the recommended process for them. And I'm not here to tell you what to do, how to respond, but I am going to give you some advice on the best way to respond in certain instances. Some of those being a little bit more of a hard stop, like the parties to a contested case. But often you'll see people will just email the entire commission. And everyone knows to not reply all to that. And I have been very impressed with that. Well, I think the only responses that I've seen go have been like, thank you, or I forwarded this. But, and those have been individual, but those are a little bit more complicated. You can always send those, I know that there's like Commissioner Hargraves always sends me the emails that he gets, and I take care of them. Sometimes I will write you all quickly, depending on what the giant group email said of, hey, we know this is happening. Please don't respond. We're dealing with it. If you want to know ultimate resolution, we can talk about that later, but, and you see those. So the first one that we talk about is emails from parties to a contested case. They should never be emailing you, trying to communicate with you, similar to the message I sent out the other day about trying to talk to you at meetings. Now, do they always identify themselves as, hello, my name is Vanessa Burgess and I'm a party to a contested case before you? No, they don't. I wish they did. That'd be really easy. But you do want to be mindful when someone starts giving you a lot of details about an issue that they're having that's very specific. That's a little bit of a cue in of, okay, this either needs to be a complaint or it is a complaint, or something weird is happening at the agency, right? And all three of those are very relevant. So you probably want to get in touch with either me or Chelsea. Sometimes it's something else, but often if you just send it to Chelsea, you get it to the right person. So sometimes it's a licensing question, and we get a lot of, I'll pick on, not on licensing because it's not them typically, I will say, it's, I've done everything right and it's taken 9 months to get my license and what's happening and all these things. And it would be real easy to get that email and say, wow, this is outrageous. I'm so sorry this has happened to you. That's not our agency. I'm gonna look into it, right? But we'll take care of it.
Yep.
And then when we reach out to Denise, she has got, you know, all these notes from the person who's working on it, which is like, well, we reached out to them, you know, 16 different times because they haven't turned this in and they haven't done this. And, you know, we've been working with them. Or, hey, you know what, this is one where something weird did happen and we know that. And so, you know, it's similar. You want to get all sides. It's also why you don't that's the parties talking to you, or parties in case, because you want to get all the sides. Because we want to make sure as an agency that we are resolving issues if they're happening, but also not just saying, you know, this is crazy, like this should never have happened, you know. I mean, not that anyone's doing that. I always do extreme responses. Yes.
You know, you talk about emails there.
Yeah.
And probably the best line there is the last one. And those 2 words, respond at all, is probably the best policy, because once you involve yourself, oh my God, just trying to make sure, like you said, that you've got both sides of the equation to make a, you know, is it something that needs to be taken care of? Do I need to be involved? I will say that I did get a call once
You did?
about somebody whose license had been revoked, and he was like, hey, what can I do? Can you help me? And I don't think this was right. You take the call because you don't know who it is. And once he starts, you know, telling you who he is and what is, it's like, okay, well, now I gotta entertain him because he's actually on the line. And the best thing I could tell him is let me find out what's going on.
Yeah.
Come back to you guys, and but inserting yourself in a situation where administratively, I don't have the time to be dealing with somebody that lost a license, you know. That's not, I don't think that's our role here. And they will find every way to bring you in to get them. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
And so,
Well, and we want the message to be consistent between us
Yeah.
all.
of course.
And what I love is that what y'all send our way seems to fit into a couple of categories. One is that there's an issue that we didn't know about that we can fix before y'all email them back. You know, like, I mean, we can have licensing on the phone with him to say, I didn't know about this. Tell us what we can do. And then we can give you a response and you can be finished, right?
Mm-hmm.
That happens because we're not perfect. Or we have had a long history with them and they're forum shopping, kind of picking one parent over the other scenario. Or it's in process and we can give you an update of what's going on and why it's taking so long. And there's outliers, but I'm amazed at how responsive, most of these things tend to be licensing issues and just how responsive Denise's team is on that.
And I think a lot of it stems from the fact that we as people like to help people.
Yeah.
And that's our natural inclination, is to help someone resolve their issue, right?
When people call
And-
me, I say, oh, okay, I need to get you to the right person because if I sometimes I mess things up worse, because I do. And so also I need your email and your phone number, and I'm gonna make sure you get a call from someone. And that way I can follow up with them. But that works for the phone. I'm just like, what's your email, what's your phone number? And then I send that to licensing and they tell me what happened.
And then after you take the initial call, let's say I haven't gotten an answer in 2 weeks, I've gotten 3 calls from the same person. Hey, what's the status? What's the status? Now I've got something I on my plate that I got to deal with. And it's not as easy as, it's like inserting yourself into a situation that you're going to have to see through. And, you know, all of us have busy careers and lives. And so it just.
And then it becomes before it's already.
Well,
Yeah.
that's right. So if somebody's like, hey, I lost my license, what can you do about it? Turns out they haven't actually lost their license yet. They've got a PFD coming up. You've been talking to them about the situation, you know how to recuse, right? And they're not gonna tell you that, right? And they may not, and they may not know, right? They probably don't know to tell you that. So, I mean, full benefit of the doubt on that, but the result is the same. But you can always send it to us, and I think a lot of you do, and you let us know. I'm
But-
looking at,
Vanessa, with respect to emails, and I know I mentioned this stuff the last training, do we need our TREC emails published? Is that absolutely necessary by statute? I mean, because if it's not, I'd rather not have those emails come to me. It's just,
like, your TREC emails up
Yes.
there.
yes, that's how they're sending it to my TREC email.
And then it forwards to your, yeah.
And then it comes into my email and said, I'd just rather not, for so many reasons, like the ones we just talked about right now. So that's just my thought.
Yeah, does anyone else have thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, as a public member, I can see it as an industry member, our email's out there. So I mean, whether it's a TREC email or office, but for a public member, I could see that they want it eliminated. I don't know.
I would say it's fairly common for agencies to not have them listed. But I mean, I kind of think it's a transparency thing. I don't mind if it's out there if I don't, well, I mean, that one forwards to a very specific email address. That's all I use it for. So, I mean, if I don't, I'm not gonna reply to somebody with it, so they're never gonna see my real email address. I mean, I'll reply to y'all, but not to.
You're so savvy.
It's very, I mean, I think, and I can't speak to things from before my time, but I'm going to. I believe that was part of a move on the commission's part to like make sure everything was fully transparent. It's like the general counsel email.
That came up at the executive committee, right? Is that where we had that discussion?
What's that?
Did we have that discussion at the executive committee
No, I was
don't
at the
think
last
so.
training.
at the last training?
Yes,
Okay.
but I
Last year,
think that.
last year around
Add
this
it to the
time.
executive committee.
Yeah, yes, I think that's a great one for executive committee, and we'll put it on for December, and, it's not a requirement, but it's whether, I think the position was taken prior, probably as a result of some of the feedback from Sunset. I'm making this up, but I think that's right, that we put up a lot more email addresses, like how you could get in touch with divisions, which that makes sense.
And so, as an example, one day I opened up my email and I had like 80 some emails. And for me to have that many emails unread at one time just drives me nuts, right? So I started to say, wait a minute, they're all coming from they all read the same thing.
Oh, the petition,
The Save Israel, email.
yes, yeah.
And oh my God, I must have gotten 150 of those emails. They just kept coming through.
Because they picked up that email.
And then he got a text.
Okay, so that's contested cases. So on contested cases, it's more of a hard stop, right? Because you can't communicate with parties to a contested case that way, right? You do it as a full commission when they're up before you. You've got to have all of the parties present. So emails from license holders, we've kind of talked about this. I don't know too much detail, but it is typically best to forward to Chelsea or me, you have a choice. So we can make sure it gets to the right person. And that could be enforcement, that could be licensing, it could be education, it could be me. But that is the way to do it. As we know, someone who is upset about something is usually not going to say, let me give you a fair rendition of what happened, how it was treated, and what all the details were, right? I mean, myself included, okay? Like if I'm bringing something up because I'm mad at my husband, I'm not talking about how he also takes out the trash and blah, blah, blah. It's that he never does anything and I do all the dishes. So we all get it. We get the tendency. But it's in this scenario, it's best to let us figure out what's really going on and to get all the sides. And if you can avoid taking a position, it is helpful because you don't have all the information in this scenario. Certainly responding with a position of like, that's just really horrible, or, I know this does happen. Licensing is the very worst. we all know licensing is not the very worst. They are excellent. I just see Denise. The education is the worst. Vanessa is the worst. Whatever it is.
Well, then they weren't around 10 years ago.
There you go. I say that, and I'm giving examples. I don't want anyone to think I think anything of it. I'm just saying words. But if you chime in to that extent, one, you have made yourself a friend forever in the person who has written you. So expect that. But two, you're a commissioner, but you're of a commission, and what you say matters, and people think it's the entire commission's position. And so then we'll see it in the Facebook groups. Well, I had someone say that.
On the commission.
Yeah,
TREC said.
TREC said that,
I was wrong.
Right, exactly. They said that I was wronged, and they said that they are very aware of issues with the elevator division at TREC, and they're gonna take care of it. It's theirs, right? Something like that. And that might not even be what you said.
But the credibility of the agency and of the commissioners is put to question.
It is.
Name dropping.
It is. And they may not, look, I've been subject to this. I've had someone post on Facebook, TREC General Counsel said this, and I was like, I didn't say that. That's not at all what I said. So I know what that's like too, but just remember, as a commission, you're a group of 9. But when you speak, you're often speaking in what people think is the voice of 9. That does not mean you can't say thank you. I will pass this along to the right person. I mean, you don't have to ignore them. You certainly can. You can also just say thank you. I have forwarded your message. This is actually the right avenue to go, is through the agency itself. All right. So I sent a draft. I wrote something. Thank you for your email. I'll make sure to pass this along to appropriate staff at TREC. It is always helpful to hear from our license holders. And that can be true. Like if somebody sends you an email that's like, this is just the best agency ever, and my license was turned around in 2 days, and it's just, I can't believe it, right? Certainly it's easier to respond to those and say, thank you so much for that feedback. Like, I'm happy to share that. It's great to know we're doing our best or whatever. You don't get a lot of those emails, right? But you do get them, and we love hearing them. But it's the same. We want to make sure that we get them to the right place, the right person, and that we also know what's going on, because every once in a while, it is something that, it's like Chelsea said, like, we're not perfect. Maybe we did drop the ball on one. Maybe they were given incorrect information, and if they were, probably wasn't done to be mean or
Maliciously.
Yeah, maliciously. It was just a mistake, and we can correct a mistake. But if we don't know about it, yeah, right?
Let me add to that. We had a situation on a license renewal a couple months ago, and sent it in. They emailed me. I sent it to Chelsea. She got it licensing, and there was a glitch. There was something happened. There was a glitch. Licensing reached out on the phone, talked to this person. And I mean, unlike yours, they took responsibility. How did this happen? Where did it happen? And staff learns, because we see the averages. It's the outliers that we need to worry about. When it happens, I mean, every time I send it to them, it gets taken care of, and with a follow-up. And so that's the only way we move the agency even more forward, is to send it to them and let them take care of it. And they do, very much so.
And I think we work in an environment that is, you don't need to hide your mistakes. You need to fix them. You need to address them. And that is super helpful as an agency. I don't think there's fear of making a mistake. Well, certainly no one wants to, but if you do, it's not something you gotta hide, and that builds an agency. And so it's always helpful to be given the opportunity to look into it versus having sort of an opinion rendered prior. And so we'll get everybody to where they need to go. Emails from members of the public, you can do a similar response. You don't want, you don't want somebody, let's say that I just bought a house and my agent watched the whole thing and there's not even a house anymore, right? But I paid all this money. And you don't need that information because they need to file a complaint, right? They need to file a complaint, and you can always direct someone to file a complaint. But if you pass it along to Mike, to us, we can handle that part, and that way you haven't received details that you don't want later on when this case is before you, and you're like, well, wait, in that email, it said X, Y, and Z, and I know that you're the one who burned it to the ground, agent, because I read it in that email, things like that. So it'll get us everywhere. It'll also get everything where it needs to go, hopefully to not in that instance to a complaint investigation. Emails from media. So this is a little bit different, but it does happen. We're starting to see it a little bit more actually. And you can always refer to TREC. Summer added a lot of really great notes in here. But forwarding these emails prior to a response, especially, again, you're a commissioner, so unless you're saying clearly, this is not my position as a commissioner, this is my position as Scott Kesner, though I think it's hard to separate the two, even
They
if
will
you say
dumb that out.
Yeah, that part will be edited out, right? But forwarding them to us so that one, we know what questions are being asked, and that we can work with you to either the agency respond or to help you in any response you might want. We don't want to cloud your position as a commission, but we do want to ensure consistency, that we know what's going on out there. I will say, you never know why a media person is asking you a question. Usually involves a lot of quick Googling when I see them, because I have no idea what they're talking about, but you never know. And so taking that position can be, it will actually end you, like you'll end up on the front page of the newspaper. So.
Vanessa.
Yes.
Have you ever had a situation where the emails were discoverable in a contested case in district court, or the emails to the commission?
Well, those don't go into the contested case files.
Or any case,
Right.
any
right.
lawsuit, yeah.
Right, but your emails that you receive as a commissioner are, subject to PIA, could be subject to discovery. As I know, I'm looking at MA, I think enforcement's got their record keeping system where the specifics, not all communications are gonna go in there necessarily. It's gonna be the ones that are relevant to the actual case. That's correct. But generally speaking, yes, all of the things here are discoverable, right? Or PIA-able, unless it's something I've sent you where there's a privilege component to it. So that's also something to be mindful of, which is like you create records, and so even if no one saw them originally, next thing you know, I want all of Commissioner Pena's emails.
Right. And if you're included in that CC, they're confidential, they're attorney-client privilege, right?
If I'm in there, yes. And I always try to make that very clear. I try and always put my signature block. It's at least somewhere in that thread, and we can handle that side of it. All right, so they can help you draft a response. They can also communicate. Summer does a great job of, if she doesn't have what they want, giving them something else that they might actually need. So, she's talking about how they conflate the associations with us, things like that. She does a great job of like, well, actually they're distinguishable because of this. I see you have questions about a license. Here's some information on TREC's authority to license real estate sales agents and brokers, and here's a quick sheet or whatever. I'm making this up, but that's, she does that. That is what she does for a living. And I think she's particularly good at it, and Sierra as well, right? We've got a good team, and they can help you. And I don't ever want to say you must answer this way or that way, with the exception of contested cases, but we wanted to bring this up because I think we've had a lot, not media, but we've just had a lot of emails going to you all. This is one. Emails from TREC employees or former employees. And I know we had an experience with this one this year. I would 100% send those to me. You can send them to Chelsea as well, but you can definitely send them to me. If it's about a former employee, I certainly hope I know all about it from the second I see the name, because I also work and advise on employment issues. But what if it's somebody who's saying something else? Like they're like, hey, my current supervisor is discriminating against me because of X. I want to know that. You probably don't want to know anything about that because you don't want to be involved in anything like that. You don't want to be called to the stand. That's really agency operations. And we handle that and we take it very seriously. So I just would always just forward those. And if you want more information, if you want to know, this is on all of these. If we can tell you, we will. It may need to be later once something is closed, and we'll circle back with you. You can always ask us for, hey, whatever happened with that person who was really mad because they got stuck in the elevator? I'm gonna keep blaming the elevators because we have no control over them. But if we did. Okay, so what if I agree with the person's complaint or think they have some valid points, right? That's great. That can be great. But we need to make sure that that agreement is done in an open meeting. That discussion happens with all of the commissioners, because, you know, what Commissioner Russell thinks is a terrible thing that's happening at the agency, Commissioner Woodruff might be like, actually, that's the best thing that's happened, right? Like, that change makes sure I get my license in 2 days. Why would we not want that change, right? And so it's a commission position, but the conversation, right? And I think we're going to see some of it today as we talk about initiatives, right? Because as a commission, you're going to develop initiatives, and you're going to hear individuals' thoughts and ideas, and you're going to have that back and forth. This is an open meeting. You can do that. This is the place for that. And this is going to cue into your stakeholders, right? Your initiatives cue into your stakeholders. And they know what you're working on, what you think is important. I think they all know broker responsibility has been sort of at the forefront in the last however many years. But that's the place to take that position. And it's okay to disagree. It's okay to agree, all of that. It's just important you do it in the right venue and not in an email with, certainly not with 4 commissioners, right? Or 4 other commissioners, but also not with one person, because again, we're getting into that spot where it's like, well, it's not the full commission's position. I don't know, but I'm going to say it is, and I'm going to go to 16 different groups and say that this is that, and that happens. We know it happens, right? We all, I mean, anyone who's in the industry, I think, sees the groups. I only get to hear highlights from the groups because I'm not in them, but I know it happens, right?
I left all of them.
And that's, yeah, I mean, and you know, to an extent that might be helpful, or as a silent observer is probably helpful as well. But I'm, you know, also, that's your thing. I just want to talk to you about the risks and the implications, and what my legal advice would be to you. So taking a position as a commissioner outside of a meeting and or before discussing an area of concern with the chair can give the impression that you speak for the entire commission. So you can go to the chair and say, hey, this is something that I'm bothered by and I really want to fix. And he can help facilitate that conversation. You can do it here in these meetings, you can do it in the regular open meetings, if we need an agenda item, et cetera. So that's something that is possible, we just want to do it the right way. And I already said this, we can give you resolution eventually. Sometimes it's immediate because it's, oh, actually that license was already issued and it was sent out 7 days ago or whatever. I'm sorry, Denise, your licensing division is perfect. It's just we're a licensing agency. So it all comes back.
Pick on me all you want. We're not perfect.
That's right. But the outside of contested cases, we can usually give you an answer. We're gonna ultimately give you an answer on a contested case, but we gotta make sure it's not gonna come before you once it's done. Okay, this is my summary. So forwarding is probably the safest and most effective way to actually resolve the issues that are raised in the emails, which I think is what you want, right? If someone's got an issue, we want to know what it was and we want to get it resolved either way. So forwarding those to the appropriate staff, it's usually Chelsea and me, just me, depends. Often those emails you get don't have all the information needed to provide a helpful and thorough response because we do want to help. You never know when a license holder will be before you at a commission meeting in a contested case. And an individual statement from you can be perceived as the opinion of the entire commission. Nothing prohibits you from saying, thank you. I've received your email and passing it along. Maybe not in this contested case ones. Again, I think that's the one where you don't reply at all, but it's fine. I mean, we've put some draft language in there, but you know, thank you, I'm gonna pass this to the right person. I appreciate you're sharing your concerns. And that's fine. That makes you available to the extent you want to be that available. That's okay. And I think you all know, you know, the chair mentioned this and I too have noticed an increase. I mean, we've got people calling people. You know, you're not hard to find, even if we take your email addresses off. But we'll talk about that in executive. So that's it. That's the highlights. If anybody has any questions or thoughts, or you just want me to stop talking, that works too.
Gary is like en route from the garage.
Okay, so Gary is walking from the garage, which I'm just, if anyone has any questions or anything.
Yep. Does an email to us at our commission address automatically go to our?
Yes, it does. It's actually not, it's called an alias email. It's not even a real email. Like you don't have an inbox associated with it. It's just sort of a dummy name that forwards to whatever email you've given us.
You
And
do
if
want
you would like a different email, like Commissioner Hargrave says, he's got one that's just for commission emails, you can change it.
Well, and I was gonna say, if you ever do respond, make sure you're aware of what email address is being used to respond. You know, is it your TREC email? Is it an email that you don't want the world to know about?
You
So
can't
if we
respond from a TREC email,
So whatever we respond is from our personal emails.
whatever email you have asked us.
So
So if we
now-
want,
Probably a reason
To remove
not
the
to
email.
respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, or to change, I mean, you could also
Easily
change it the way that Commissioner Hargrave says he's done, where he's just got one email address that ties to, and he gets nothing else with that email. Sounds like that's a conversation that we're going to have.
Do we receive other communications? Important, like,
Like
do
from
you,
one of
do you
us.
all, do you all
Very.
email us at our personal or at the TREC email?
Well, I would say I do both,
Okay.
but yes, we use that,
So if we, let's say designate, you know, xyz@yahoo.com as our email and let it go into oblivion, right?
Yeah.
Will we miss
Yes.
important communications from
Right,
that?
so I wouldn't let it go into oblivion.
Right.
But you could keep it out of your personal email, and then when you respond, so let's say you get Commissioner Ben Pena@gmail.com.
Right.
It's also gonna It's gonna help us in open records and it's gonna keep you out of your personal email and stuff gets complicated real fast.
That's why I was asking about,
So that's,
discoverability, because now I've got people looking into my email and I've got client information that I don't want.
I already use Commissioner in Gmail.
Yeah. You already got that. You want to be able to get that. Take it.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you will sell it.
For a price, yeah.
Sell it to you.
Yeah.
Do we want to take 5 minutes? We need a 5 minute. We're on.
Okay. Well, we have two special guests with us now. Gary Naylor, who, Gary, I'm gonna botch your new title. He is the outgoing executive director for the Real Estate Research Center at Texas A&M. And we have Pamela Ken, who is the new executive director at the center. So Gary, you have a new title. Can you please say it? I wrote it down, but it's
I'm the
long.
Director of Strategic Initiatives.
Oh, well, that's not that long. I should have been able to keep that in my brain, but both of them have been at the center for a long time. So Pam is the new ED, but she's not new to the center. Of course, y'all know that we fund the center through a collection of fees. And one of the changes in January is to kind of correct that fee collection to make sure they are more fully funded. It's been an ongoing issue for the last couple of years just because of a statutory mistake, really, that happened a couple of years ago. But we have an MOU with the center that outlines our relationship. Commissioner Russell has sat as the liaison between the center and the commission. Is that right? Has anybody else served in that capacity? I don't think so.
I think Jan was the one.
Jan was as well. But we have, part of the MOU says that we will get reports from the center at 2 of the commission meetings. And at this commission meeting, it is for an annual report. And then in the spring, we hear from the center on kind of the economic outlook for real estate. So I'll just pass it to them. This is intended to be informal, but more than anything, I'm thankful for the strong relationship we have with the center and with the two of you specifically. And I'm just really grateful for our information sharing and our ability to just support the real estate industry. So go for it.
Okay, thank you.
Take it away.
Wow, well, I've been at the center, many of you know me, I've been around forever, 45 years. I've been the director of the center for 18 years. It's not often that you get to choose your own boss. So I get to step down and choose my own boss. It's really cool. So Pam and I've had a great relationship. I saw early on, she's a go-getter, she's energetic, she's bright, and she's hungry. I mean, she enjoys doing this. She has a background in organizational effectiveness, and she's very effective at it. And really, the skill sets she's got today, I think, are what we need even more than the skill sets that I had with all of my peers. Those old baby boomers that just sort of, we all just kind of got together like a band of brothers, and we went out and got things done. This new group, they need a little more hand-holding, and she's really good at the hand-holding. I'm really good at strategy and developing new ideas, and I think we're going to have some fun together going forward in this transition period. I'm going to hang around for a while and do that. And I'll take you into some of the new stuff that I'm working on right now. I think you're going to really love that as well. I put out on the table before you sort of the strategies that we've been working on for a number of years. And we've accomplished a lot of those things on that list. And I'll be going into more detail on that in a few minutes. But you can see what's guided us for all the time that I've been there. Things like the work we've done on housing affordability, the geospatial element, just about everything we do, the strong relationship with key groups, all the industry groups, not just realtors, not just people in the brokerage industry, but the home builders and associated general contractors and the architects and all of those other groups of people that make real estate possible. Because without the product, the brokers don't have anything to sell. And we still emphasize that in our work, in our research, and Pam's totally committed to that as well. In fact, next week, I'll be sitting in as part of the executive committee with the home builders. I'm now embedded with the home builders so that I can learn more about what really is going on in the industry and bring that back to the team at the research center so we can do a better job at looking at what will really make a difference in housing affordability. I have some pretty good ideas about that because I've built a bunch of houses myself. But I know the world has changed a bit and the regulatory environments out there. There's just a lot of things that are out there, and I want to get a lot more insight into that. And they've graciously made me part of their team to do that. So I'm excited about that going forward. One of the things that I've emphasized, and Pam emphasizes as well going forward, is that we want to look at the why so we can understand what's going to happen. Because if you understand why people are doing things, you can predict what they're going to do. You're going to see a lot of phrases like that in that little piece of paper right there. I carry it around on literally a little small card. I just didn't have enough of those left to carry around. But having that in hand has helped me to communicate what the center is and what we do more effectively than anything that we've ever done. That's kind of a look back. I want to take a little bit of a look, even more of a look back, and I want to read you something that I think will set the stage for what I want to talk about this morning. This is from the Congressional Budget Office. This is not some right-wing group or left-wing group. It's supposedly a group that's supposed to be pretty much even-handed. They tend to be a little bit more left than right. But I want you to listen to this as I read this. And my page got lost. There we are. CBO, quoting the CBO, the federal government borrows more each year. That increase in federal borrowing pushes up interest rates and thus reduces private investment in capital, causing output to be lower in the long term than it would be otherwise, especially in the last 2 decades of the projection period. Less private investment reduces the amount of capital per worker, making workers less productive and leading to lower wages. Those lower wages reduce people's incentive to work and consequently lead to smaller supply of labor. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Have any of you been trying to recruit like we're trying to recruit? Has it been easy to recruit people? No. People don't have the incentive to work anymore, do they? They don't. Now, that's talking about the debt side of things. Let's talk about the revenue side of things. Again, quoting CBO. So we haven't done anything about the debt side, and let's talk about, are we going to do something about the revenue side? Higher marginal tax rates on labor income would reduce people's after-tax wages and weaken their incentive to work. Sounds like we're in a box, doesn't it? Likewise, an increase in the marginal tax rate on capital income would lower people's incentives to save and invest, thereby reducing the stock of capital and in turn, labor productivity. That reduction in labor productivity would put downward pressure on wages, and all told, less private investment and smaller labor supply decrease economic output and income in CBO's extended baseline projections. What they're saying, I think, is we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. The only way to solve this is to cut back on some of the spending, but that's not going to happen either because the politicians are buying our votes, so they keep getting back into office, right? I mean, that's what's happening. That's what's happening. So in that context, I want to talk about what we're doing to address that, because in a world like that, what we're facing is that there is no normal anymore, right? There really isn't. What we would think of as normal in the marketplace just doesn't exist today. The old time-tested maxims that we use to guide us, they don't apply anymore. They really don't. I mean, the reason for that is that the way the markets are supposed to work, they don't work anymore. Why? Why is that happening? Because the government has been so heavy-handed with pouring money into the marketplace. We've all kicked the can down the road, right? We started doing that even back in the Great Recession. We didn't let the market come to real market pressures and take the rates down, the values down that they should have. And we kicked the can down the road, hoping things would get better, hoping it's going to get better. And we're still kicking the can down the road, really. We really are still. So we juiced the economy and flooded it with money. And in particular, we've headed down a road where the country's so divided. We're going down a road that at least half the population doesn't agree with it. And you've got this consternation that's going on in the marketplace that keeps us paralyzed from doing anything. So what does the real estate center, a group like us, what do we do in a situation like that to remain relevant? What do we do? Well, we've come up with the idea that we need, in every core area of what we do, that we need thought leaders, not just people that have quantitative skills, but people who have enough experience, enough savvy, that they can look at not only the numbers and their models, but they can actually relate to people from their own experience and say, this is what I think is going to happen. And that's the direction we're going forward. And I know Pam's gonna, I hope she says a few things about this as well. But indeed, as you get into what we're talking about today, I'll have a couple other handouts for you. In fact, let me just do that now. Let me hand this out, just pass those around. This is a model I drew up to talk about the center's success, how we define our success. And we're right on the cusp, I think, of doing something really significant in the work that we do, because we're focusing on some core areas of the center. And I've highlighted those. I've made my own marks on my own graphic here with some more arrows to say, we're going to focus on housing, on land, on commercial, on legal, and on economics in general. Those areas. Those areas are tangential to what we're going to be doing. And we want to have thought leaders in each one of those areas, truly thought leaders, not just people who do work in those areas, but people who have the synergistic skills to go out and make cogent judgments about what's going on in the marketplace and bring that to bear for our audiences all across the board. I want to talk a little bit about what we've done in the past year. We had 79 reports that we generated, 64 presentations to audiences, both in terms of Zoom and in person. We've also realized the dream of covering all segments of real estate, including commercial, residential, and industrial. We never had that commercial component. And that was something I was always pushing for years and years and years. Pam was able to help recruit Daniel Loney. Daniel Loney comes from one of the largest brokerage firms in the state of Texas. And he's brought real structure to our research team. And he's doing personal research in the commercial area that I think is really going to have an impact on what the center does going forward. We're still trying to recruit a top-notch housing economist, again, a thought leader in that area. We've had housing economists come and go, but not the kind of person that we're really looking for yet. How many people have you interviewed, Pam? Yeah, a good handful, that's for sure. And none of them had the skill sets that we were looking for. They might have had the quantitative skills, but they didn't have that sense of the marketplace that we're looking for that can really turn the tide and share what we think really is going on in the marketplace. Some highlights of some of the research that we performed. One of the things that makes us successful, and it's on this first sheet I handed out, is that we strive to have proprietary data that no one else has. We either buy it, we barter for it, or we develop it ourselves. And the data relevance data is one of those things. That was one of the first major projects that I took on when I became the director of the center, is to turn around our technology and take our analysis down to the neighborhood level. We've done that as well as acquiring data on migration in the state of Texas. And we've done some studies in this past year on migration and migration patterns. And we're going to continue to do more of that. This is a combination of data that's gathered from the credit bureaus, from moving van line companies, from a myriad of different sources. And we can triangulate that data. It's geocoded, by the way. We can pair that with the data we get from the Data Relevance Project, from TR. And we can actually look at what impact people who migrated from California had on prices in a particular neighborhood in Austin, Texas, for instance, or anywhere else in the state of Texas. We can actually conduct this study nationwide if we wanted to, not in terms of that, but we could look at where people migrate to in other states. It's an amazing data set, amazing data set. The impact of institutional investors on entry-level housing and availability and affordability. We've covered that this past year. We looked at geospatial analysis to demonstrate the key performance indicators in markets all across the state of Texas and in metropolitan areas. And we've also looked at the diminished housing stock and the rapid price appreciation on affordability. And that comes from a myriad of sources. Again, we looked at regulations, we looked at the shortage of skilled labor, we looked at material cost, we looked at the delivery of goods and services. There is not one single golden bullet or silver bullet that will heal the problem with housing affordability. It's a myriad of issues that we have to deal with. And then the future of work is another thing we focused on clearly at the center heavily. We have a young man who's come back into the College of Business Administration And he's worked with one of the largest companies in the state as well, with JLL. And they've done a lot of research in this area. And we've continued to pursue what the workplace will look like going forward. We completed several conferences this year as well. And this is kind of the annual report in verbal form. Our 32nd annual land conference had record attendance, almost 590 people in attendance. It's a record for us in that particular conference. We had one of them we did years ago, the legal conference on ad valorem taxation. We used to attract close to 700 at that one. We no longer do that program, but the land conference was well attended. And we also did broker responsibility, working with the commission on this. And let's see, we did Bryan College Station, Fort Worth, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, and Houston in person. We also did some of those courses electronically, and then we did the MC Legal Update 1 and 2 in College Station with 30 attendees. So we had 211 attendees going to the instructor training courses, 30 people attending the instructor training classes in College Station. And we had our first PropTech conference with 132 attendees at Texas A&M as well. And then when I first took over as director of the center, our communications team, we have won 2 gold quill awards from the International Association of Business Communicators. My brain is on fried today. I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Sorry about that. I'm acting like Joe Biden this morning. I'm sorry about that. But literally, we had won 2 gold quills. I incited them. I said, guys, we need to win more of those things. And since then, we've now won 7 gold quill awards.
Wow.
From IABC. That's the highest award you can receive from International Business Communicators. That covers institutions, businesses, corporations all around the globe, not just in the United States, but all around the globe. We won 7 gold quills. So I'm really proud of that fact. And we recruited a guy, oh gosh, Tom Coffer, is going to set the world on fire. I think he and I are brothers in terms of our creativity. He's coming up with a whole bunch of ideas about how we can reach more people with our information. One of the things that we've been facing is A&M has had a lot of change in leadership, unfortunately, and that should not affect us, but it has. And what happens is we have to adapt to the new leadership style, and it's been a real challenge for the center going over the last couple of years. We've done pretty well in that, but we've been moved again. As of November 15th, we'll now move under the Vice President Research under the Provost office. And so Pam is up to that. I'm up to that with her. We're going to work together with them. I think the Vice President for Research is a pretty good guy, and we're hoping to carve out a great relationship with him so that we can continue to function well there. A&M's had a hard time trying to figure out where we belong. And if they don't figure that out pretty soon, we'll find another place to belong. There's been a lot of market uncertainty. There's been a lot of great resignation issues for us to deal with. Some of the things I talked about to start with is the difficulty of recruiting research talent. We just haven't been able to find those people. They're not minting any more PhDs in real estate. I mean, guys like Mark Dotzer that came out. Remember, Mark Dotzer was so effective in what he did. There are very few schools offering PhDs in real estate anymore. So the talent pool is small. People are not willing to go to work. They're not willing to relocate. We were talking about that driving up here. They're also rate locked in their houses. Think about that. And if you've got a house and you've got a mortgage that's 2 or 3%, you don't want to refinance at 8%, or you don't want to end up in a house somewhere else at 8%. So people are staying put. They're not moving as much. And that's true across all industries, not just in our situation. So our responses to what we've been facing, we hired the first ever director of research. We never had a real director of research. We always tried to combine that. My brain's coming back. You can tell Joe Biden went away. We really always tried to combine that with our chief economist. It's too much for one person to do. So we brought Daniel on. We said, you're going to be the director of research and director of research only. You do your own research as well, but instead of trying to get this person to go out and speak and do 50 or 60 speeches a month and then try to organize and run the research team, it just doesn't work well. So we're doing a better job of, I think, of how should I say this, delegating the responsibility instead of all of it concentrating at the top. The other thing we've done is, and I'll talk about this now, I think it's important to go ahead and show you the future going forward, is this is another way that we've tried to address the issue of not being able to recruit talent on our research team. I was talking to Denise Price up in Amarillo a few months ago, actually back in February. And she said, Gary, you know, your research economist did a good job of conveying the information. And NAR's guy, Lawrence Yoon, he was there speaking as well. He said, they both did a good job, but it was really our local economist, Ann Macy, that put legs under it. She made it palpable for the audience. And I thought, there's some work in that somewhere. I went home and I thought about it overnight, and then I looked on the internet and I started looking at how many universities and colleges there were and research and extension centers there were across the state. And a little light bulb went off in my head and I said, why don't we contract with researchers? I bet I can find researchers at these universities and colleges that we could contract with and do the research right there. They're going to be familiar with what's going on in the marketplace. And indeed, that's where we're going. That's my new job. If you look at that chart, I'm going to be as I said, the Director of Strategic Initiatives. You look at those things off here, the Rainmaker, that's me. And what we're going to do is we're going to contract with people all across the state of Texas to reach the second and third tier metropolitan statistical areas, as well as the micropolitan areas of the state of Texas. The first three we're standing up are in Stephenville with Tarleton State, which is part of the A&M system. There's a young lady up there that I know very well, Nina Rogers. She's a very competent researcher. She's going to do a study on migration and look at the impact on housing prices in those three communities up there in Granbury, in Weatherford, and in Stephenville. That'll be one of our first projects looking at micropolitan areas in the state. I'm also going to work with Jim Lee down in Corpus Christi to look at the interplay between industry and housing. How dependent are the two on each other? We're finding in Corpus Christi that the growth of the industrial base there is really dependent on the growth of the housing market. If they can't house people, they can't get the talent or the skill sets that they need for welders and pipe fitters and electricians and everything else. So we're going to do a really in-depth study, and Jim Lee is a horse. This guy, he came out of University of Pennsylvania as an economist, and he cranks out reports like crazy. So I'm really excited about working with Jim. I went down and met with him. He's excited about working with us. We're going to return back to John Hill up in Abilene and try to get him to work on a project with us. We haven't identified what that's going to be yet. We're doing research in the communities to identify those research projects. And I've talked to Ann again. Ann had an unfortunate, really difficult year with some deaths in the family and illness and other things. And then I've also identified a young man up at the University of Texas in Tyler, who is their lead research analyst. And we haven't identified the exact topic there yet, but I have good reports on him as a top flight researcher as well. So we've got 4 or 5 potential projects that we're going to try to get off the ground in this coming year to get this project off the ground. We're going to continue to grow our research fellows as well. And if you've been reading Tierra Grande lately, you'll note that we've added an insurance guy. And he's writing on insurance because insurance is so critical to real estate. He's written on floodplain insurance. He's written on risk and mitigation, even in your research firms, in your brokerage firms. This next one of the other things we're going to be working on, I'll ask another attorney to weigh in on the topic of Reed Wilson in Houston. You may know him, those of you from the Houston area. He is going to do a project for us on the hot topics in land use law, which is another area that's really coming into play right now with all the regulations coming out of the government. Land use law is becoming more and more important. So we're going to continue to grow our research fellows as well. That gives you some idea. I have one other handout which shows you the listing of all of the micropolitan and metropolitan areas we're going to try to cover over time. I'll give you some insight now into the plan of work that we just passed, this past meeting that we had. Here's a few of the topics, not all of them, just a few. How do interest rates, property taxes, and home prices change the number of households who can afford a home? What share of real estate assets and fund transactions involve non-US entities? In other words, foreign buyers, foreign investors. What legislative history and legal environment regarding foreign ownership of real estate assets in Texas? What factors are hindering increasing participation of private capital in housing finance? What share of housing investment is driven by Wall Street and hedge funds? How does projected multifamily housing supply match up with projected demand? How do households respond to wealth shocks in the context of flood damage and natural disasters? What is the direct impact of minimum lot sizes on housing costs? How is the ESG movement impacting rural land use? And then hot topics in land use law, as I just mentioned. So that's the plan. That's just part of the plan of work. Those are just some highlights from the plan of work that we passed for the coming year. I mentioned in passing that this is kind of the end of an era at the center. Charlie Gilliland and I are the two oldest serving still members of the team, along with Bob Beals is not far behind us. So the old guard is pretty much headed out the door, and the new guard is coming in. The new senior leadership team will be made up of Pam, Daniel, Oni, Tom Cawthra, and myself. And that will be the leadership team that drives the center for at least the next couple of years. And then we're going to emphasize, as I said, those core areas of housing, commercial, land, legal, and economics. The regional research partners who become really important as we go forward, the research fellows as well. And then we're trying to develop a lot of new, deep relationships with other industry groups. Another group that we're really looking hard at is AGC and the Apartment Association. The Apartment Association, I think we're about this far from getting their data, just like we do from TR. And when we get the multifamily data, we'll be able to look at the entire housing spectrum, not just single family, but multifamily as well, which will be critical to really understand what's really going on in the entire housing market, not just one segment of it. And then I'm sure along the way that between Tom and I will come up with some new high profile initiatives going forward. So I'll take some questions there. Pam, any comments you want to make, please jump in there and talk about some of your thoughts as well.
Well, let's see if there are questions maybe first. Are there any questions?
So micropolitan area is a new word for me. Is there a definition to, like, other than just it's a small town? Or is there an actual, like, a certain number of people need to live there, or there needs to be?
You know, I've tried to find that out. It looks like it's almost just a political number, really, the way they come up with it. Because some of those micropolitan areas, a couple of them are almost bigger than some of the smaller metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
That's just because Texas is growing so rapidly, they can't keep up with it. But there, you can look at the list, places like Brenham,
right? You
know, places, towns like that. Those are micropolitan areas. They're towns that are growing. They have a, I won't say a substantial population, but they've got a core population that's worthy of noting. And they've become business centers in that region. Often they're healthcare centers. Brenham's that way. Tyler, good example. Tyler's actually not in that group as well. So Tyler's actually a metropolitan area. But Sulphur Springs is up in that area. Huntsville's a micropolitan area. It's a pretty good sized little town, really, when you look at it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Good question.
Second thing I had for you is, when you do the study in Corpus about tying industry to housing, are we going to look at both permanent and temporary there? Because one of the things I know that we've struggled with in the state is temporary and workforce housing. When you look at like Eagle Ford, when you look at the border for law enforcement, things like that, it's just been tough to come across housing in those areas, but it's not always permanent development type of housing.
Right. Yeah, we haven't talked about that yet. I'll talk to Jim about that. We did a study years ago that we quantified by income tranche where the shortages of housing were. It was an interesting thing going on in Corpus Christi. What happened is we didn't have enough high-end houses and people bought down. And when they bought down, it was like a pancake effect. It kept falling, just like you compress a building floor by floor by floor. As you put pressure on the top, it went down, 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 all the way to the bottom. So you kept the pressure for shortage of housing went all the way down to the lowest level because there was a shortage of higher level housing in the marketplace. And Jim reiterated that when I met with him just a few weeks ago, saying that's still an issue in Corpus Christi. We have a shortage of high-end housing, and some of that's being mitigated, but it's not being mitigated fast enough.
Well, that sort of happened whenever the oil fields were going. People moved out there to work, but there was no place for them to live.
Yeah.
And that was the first place I was aware of it.
Some guys came out with some innovative projects where they brought in mobile housing units that were basically modular kind of units that they could put up quickly and set up basically man camps. They're not the greatest solution, but at least you didn't have people wandering the streets. I know when I was with Exxon, Friendswood Development Company, I was doing their land management work as well. I went to Wyoming and there were people sleeping in culverts with 30 degrees, 30 below winters coming on. I was there in the summer and they were literally sleeping in big concrete culverts. They were homeless people. They were there for the jobs at the Rawhide and the other mines that were the big coal mines in Gillette, Wyoming. And we partnered with 5 or 6 developers to come into town and build housing for those people. But then the government did just what they do here. They started putting impact fees on the water taps and other things, and they shut down the whole operation.
You spoke about migration patterns and the largest, I guess, metropolitan areas. I know that the Rio Grande Valley has, particularly in the Brownsville, Cameron County area, have 2 major LNG plants coming in. They've got SpaceX, and everybody talks about shortage of homes and residential.
Right.
How is that? Is that true, or how is the migration patterns towards South Texas look like?
I haven't looked at South Texas yet. We've not done anything in South Texas yet with that. That's a problem though. Define South Texas as down in Brownsville. Is that what you're about?
Cameron County.
Yeah. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is a problem. What we saw in places like Port Lavaca, when you had the big chemical plants and the plastic plants and things came in there, people were done. We see that elsewhere. People commute from hundreds of miles away. They're doing that in Houston even now. We have people commuting in Houston 100, 150 miles away. People commute. They do.
Just real quick, you mentioned the institutional purchasers, and I know Texas led the nation. Almost 40% of all houses sold last year were classified as institutional purchasers. 5% of the 14 million nationwide are owned by institutional buyers. And I know there was a bill that did not get through. I mean, when I think institutional buyers, I think of big companies. If I own 2 houses and one's in an LLC, I'm classified as institutional. I would like some type of research. How many of these institutional buyers are really mom and pop with 3 houses or 4 houses? Because it really skews the market. And especially when the city is saying, no, we're going to start restricting this because institutional buyers are buying. And it's not, it's a mom and pop. It's a veteran that can't sell his house in El Paso when he's PCS'd and he moves it to an LLC. And I think that's something that I'd love to see, especially in Texas.
We've already qualified that to some extent. Gerald Clausen has looked at that in depth. And you're right, the biggest number of actual institutional buyers are smaller entities. They're not the huge.
Less
The
than
huge ones
5.
buying more properties have a big impact. But in terms of sheer numbers, it's a large cadre of small investors that are doing that. And we actually have a study that we're working, we stood up the data for it. We're not doing anything else. TREC is doing a study along with the Apartment Association in Dallas. It's now spread to Fort Worth, and I think even Arlington may be joining in. There's a program on the 30th of this month, right up there in Dallas. And what we've done, I brought in a survey researcher that we brought in to the mix. And what we've done is identified the potential investors by going to the Dallas Association, well, not the Dallas, but the Metro Texas Association of Realtors, Fort Worth Association of Realtors, and the Apartment Association. And we surveyed those members, asking them to identify themselves, how many properties they own. So they've actually quantified for that marketplace who they are and what the constraints are, and what would their impact be if some of the regulations that the marketplace is trying to put in place in Dallas and some of those metropolitan areas, those governments are trying to put in place, what would the impact be on the housing market? And what we basically learned is that they would just shut it down. There would be no more development if they went through with some of the regulations that they're talking about putting in play. That's what the survey revealed. We didn't do the survey. We actually paid for it for them though. It was Kimberly Byram with Zonda did the study. I found Kimberly through some of my contacts and she's done a great job on that study. But we stood up the data from looking at the housing so we could identify what was happening from the single family side of rentals on the single family side. So we do have some data. We know that it's largely small investors that are doing most of this activity.
Okay, cool.
That bill,
Thanks to TREC.
Okay, thank you.
that bill is, I think it's going to be revived. That's what we're hearing.
Good. I hope so. And I know
That bill will
we're,
be revived, and the Senate will probably end up doing that study for the state. Out of that bill there was a phrase in there that would allow us to share that and more information with them. That's another one of the initiatives I'm going to be working on is Texas at a glance, critical information for our leaders so they can make better decisions. We want to stand up some data when we get the capability so they understand things like that going forward.
and I know we're pressed for time, but any other questions? You are busy, or super busy.
We need a couple more people on board. If we get 2 more critical people on board, we'll be where we need to be.
And we're glad you're getting a raise.
Yeah. Yeah, don't spend it all in one place.
Pam's going to do a great job. She's been working with me for several years. I have all the confidence in the world. She's going to be a great leader. She already is. And we're going to be in good shape.
Good.
Thank you both for coming, for sharing your insights and for these good materials. I'm grateful for the time. I know I-35 is not easy.
I hope that was helpful.
That was good.
Absolutely. Should we break for 2 or 3 minutes?
Yeah, let's break for 3 minutes.
Okay.
You don't get these. I get one. Okay, we are back. The last agenda, next last agenda item. We're gonna walk through the survey results for initiatives for 2024. We'll have some documenting those results and walking through specific issues the commission wants to address. We need the commission's support as a majority before we really move these forward, because if it's something we're not gonna support, then it's probably not worth spending a lot of time on. And this is what came through the survey. There might be some other stuff that popped up. But I'll let you kind of walk through it and we'll kind of decide if it's something we want to do, something we don't want to do, something we move somewhere else or whatever and kind of go through it, okay? And I think everything that I had sent to me is on there, but if you had something else, we can certainly add it. All right, I'll turn it over to
To me? Okay, so just as a little bit of a one-sentence overview, every other year when we're not dealing with session stuff, the commission and workshop develops some initiatives of things they would like to see achieved by the agency. And it generally starts with a survey, which you all received, where you throw down your ideas, right? I would love to see the commission no longer use paper documents and move forward and just have everything be electronic. Or I would like to see the one that I remember is the expire process. That was an initiative, which is why is it that if someone is expired, that there's essentially a look back period where their broker can say, no, it's cool, I was supervising them. And so that changed, right? That was an initiative that you all had, has changed. So I think we got 3 responses. So if you did not respond, or if you did respond, and you have more ideas or more thoughts on things you'd like to see, like feel free to throw them out there.
We can send this to you.
Yes, and this is, yes, and so what we've done here, what Summer has done is she has broken everything down in terms of the results that we did receive And so we can walk through them and figure out what you all want to be your initiatives. And then we filled in some notes just to start getting there. I think the most important thing that can come out of this meeting is one, knowing what you all want as a whole, right? And then two, really as specific as we can get, because some of these things are bigger ideas of things you want us to tackle, but we want to really drill down. I did not have that yesterday. I want to drill down into what we specifically want. What are the problems we're trying to solve? What are the issues? What are the specific issues? And that way, it's always easier to know how to address something if you know what that something is. All right, so the first one is, this was one of the results we had was the initiative related to broker responsibility. And these are just our notes of trying to capture, the efforts that we've been making and what we, what some of the sort of sub ideas are. Feel free to say, no, that's not it. Or yes, continue with this or whatever, right? This is you. We're just trying to facilitate the conversation. Yes.
Go over.
Yes. I would love to.
To help.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so this is our brainstorming document, and the goal is to identify items within the purview of the commission and are attainable through existing tools or methods, or would be attainable with access to additional tools or methods. So maybe it's a legislative change or the new database system, something along those lines. Then we've got a category of required expertise or involvement. So we would want to identify the departments and committees that would need to be involved in each initiative. Here you've got the list. So we've got customer relations. So maybe you've got something that's related to customer relations, or I know you probably don't right now, but like hold times or email response rates, we want to get them to whatever level. Just things like that. Education and examinations, enforcement, exec, finance, licensing, IT, and there's all your committees and things that you could throw their way. And it is actually always helpful for the committees at the beginning in January to have an idea of things that you all want them to look at versus just kind of ideas that have popped up. We do both. But if you have something specific, you often will get some good results out of the committees with that. So we've broken it into 3 categories of how these would play out. So we've got administrative goals for staff that do not require rulemaking or statutory changes. So that would be some process changes, things like that. We've got rulemaking. Those are goals where we say, you want to do that, we would need a rule change, we would need a new rule. So you want a response time for agents to respond in 2 days, we've got to do that in rule. The expire process was in rule. And then legislative goals that may require statutory changes to be addressed in 2025 Texas legislative session. So conversations about broker associates, one that's happening at the BRAC level is to put in statute a definition of broker associate to create a regulatory relationship. So we couldn't do any of that until there was a legislative change because we don't have that authority like I talked about earlier. So we don't have specific regulatory authority over something and we want to go in that direction or we want to change something, that's a statutory change. That's a bigger one. It's not off the table by any means, but this is kind of where you start developing what that list is going to look like when we start going there, which is surprisingly really soon that we start looking at that stuff. Okay, so now we'll go to the ideas that we were given. The first one that we've got up here is broker responsibility.
Can I say one thing before you start on the ideas? Sorry, just to prolong this further. This is a fairly long list. It's definitely not exclusive. And I think really the goal for today is to finalize it. And that could mean taking things off. It probably will mean taking some things off that you as a group of 9 don't wish to work on this year. And it could also mean adding to it. But I think the goal is to kind of say yes, no, and how, maybe. And then one last thing, I just want to make sure this is clear, that under the go paperless or less paper, we have put some meat on the bones, like some of that was kind of what I have said. Y'all have not said that in such specificity. So this is a confession that I have kind of lobbed that to you in hopes that it is something you want to address. Okay.
Yeah, and I think some of them we could even prioritize, like some of the stuff legislatively, we need stakeholder involvement because we can't do anything legislatively. So we need to approach it that, you know what, we need to make sure that we're gonna have stakeholder,
Right.
push and connections with that. But
So the initiative would probably be like developing the stakeholder input for the potential
right,
of legislative means,
because it is in 25, which is
like
sooner than you
tomorrow,
think.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
And also,
Like staff related.
Right,
than
and-
us related.
yeah,
Like,
but-
that's some of it.
But I mean, if something's legislatively, it's probably not gonna get done until third or fourth quarter because we need the involvement from the stakeholders. If something's staff, then, yeah,
And we would look
Yes,
for TR to
right, exactly.
Like the paperless stuff is more staff.
Right.
I just need your buy-in on that. So I don't want to do that if someone says, but I still want to write a check for my renewal.
But I mean, we're getting more and more
Did you
paperwork,
say, take that check to HEB and pay for your groceries?
but you're still getting how many checks?
I'm gonna get it wrong. Do you know? I'm sorry, Stuart. I'm looking right over your head.
Thousands.
Too many.
Yeah, thousands.
But from a licensing fee perspective, I think in part of Tom's reports yesterday, it's like over 96%, even his year over year comparison reports for the renewal rate, and that's the renewals being done online. Which
the
is-
first time that was lower.
Right, the initial applications
Yeah,
are lower. We don't have every initial application online right now. We're working towards that in the new system to put all of it online. And so if, I can't speak to, I think Renata probably has more info.
That's still
not to
roughly
put her on the
that's still
spot,
roughly
but-
5,000 checks a year.
And that's just applications. So I'm not speaking about
Yeah.
the education provider applications or administrative penalties. I think those come in
yeah,
by mail. There's other payments, I believe, that come in by
Right,
mail.
and just for like context, from the beginning of FY '24, from September the 1st till today, we've received 2,541 checks.
There you go.
So
That's
keep
just
in mind,
It's a month.
yeah, like all education applications are coming in with checks right now,
25,000,
but
yeah.
the new system
Other than
will
all
take care of
Yeah.
that. So,
I think that's easy, low hanging fruit. That should be an initiative for 24.
Okay, great.
Done.
So, I mean, and that's something, if we need rules,
You okay with that?
We'll work on it.
yeah, but that would definitely be rulemaking. It would not be
That's policy.
and some of it's gonna be like she said,
Yeah,
getting
policy.
stuff up online and getting it set up
Yeah.
that way. I mean, we can't demand an online payment.
Electronic transfer.
Right.
Good point.
There's that.
maybe we
There
can.
was one payment.
It's because I don't think you can pay a penalty and be online. I've never paid one, so I don't know. I don't think you can.
There is rule implication, yes. And
How much of the administrative side of things is there an element of we don't know until ramp is done?
I mean,
Yes.
generally.
Like a lot?
Yes, but we're building ramp now. So with each passing day, we have a better understanding of what our capabilities will be.
Okay.
And what I have asked in terms of like paper or processing and paper payments is that we have the ability to do those things in ramp, but we count on it. We make that the exception, not the rule. So that if somebody comes into our office and says, I'm desperate to pay you, this is my only mechanism. I've called the chair of the commission and he said to talk to you, whatever it is. Then we could say, we can help you here, but that we not have a cashier to process all that. those papers, you know, that we not have several staff members
Right.
hired to process the paper. That we make everything that possibly can be electronic. Did you have a question?
That was my question.
Okay.
And there are rules, I shouldn't have just said an administrative function is without rulemaking, because almost nothing is without rulemaking. But, you know, Denise just brought up, and I'd forgotten this point of like, well, there's a postmark rule. And I know we've had this conversation, and Chelsea's already asked us for a list of all the rules that would be implicated if we were to go paperless, and there are some. So it's not just, you know, announcing we are paperless. No more paper. So it is a bigger initiative, but you're right in terms of, it is somewhat low hanging fruit as well, in that regard. So
All you'd have to do is remove that postmark rule, because the actual transmittal of is your date stamp, right? When you get the money.
yeah, but I mean, yes, but then we also have to go look at, okay, well, where is that like, where else is paper implicated in our receipt dates? Where does it go? What do the edits look like? What are we now gonna measure? Like, is there still that period of time where we're, you know, that little bit of grace period? So we can do that part.
Happy to. We want to.
Unintended.
Yeah, that is our part to do. I'm just saying it's not, I think, when I said administrative and function, it's probably never truly administrative and function.
Yeah,
There's
it's
always
not
rules.
easy.
But yeah, so there'll be rule and fingers into whatever you're doing administratively.
Yeah, just like expire process, right? It seems easy to be like, no, just say you are expired when you expire, but actually it was a ton of rules and getting into and all that stuff. So, but we do that. You give us the initiative and you tell us what you want to fix, what the
You
issue
go out and
is,
seek wherever it affects.
and then we see if we can figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a no-brainer.
I'd also note one other thing, which is you also want to contemplate by the end of this meeting, how many initiatives you want for the year, because, you know, if we walk out of here with 24 initiatives,
We need to prioritize.
I was gonna say that.
that is,
Then we'll
That's
do
a
a little
lot.
bit of work on 24 initiatives.
So like
Yeah,
this
right.
initiative doesn't take much from any committee or the commission. This is more
Yeah.
staff-based.
Staff,
This is staff.
staff resources.
yeah,
And heavily staffed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and a lot of time these initiatives are both, right? Because what you all recommend, we typically have to implement. So,
So you'll have to kind of keep tabs of how much staff resource we casually say, yeah, we want to do it, because if you.
How hard can it be, right?
Yeah, how hard can it be? But then, you know.
Manage that resource.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, because we may get there quicker than we think going down the list. I don't know.
Go ahead.
I threw out that paperless thing, and that meant that we started in the middle of the page.
Yeah, I think the heavy stones are above.
Up
We'll go
above.
back up to broker responsibility. And I'm not going to any order. I think broker secession is something that should be our duty to protect the public.
Yeah.
Because when you have a broker pass away and they've got 24 listings and 24 people buying a house, selling a house, and everything is wiped out, that is a consumer protection issue.
Right.
I mean, we look at from a broker issue, what happens
But
to
it's a
our
consumer
listings,
issue. Yeah.
but it's a consumer protection. And I wouldn't, we have really smart attorneys in here. Would that actually be a legislative, or could it be rule to where I have somebody almost like a ladybird deed or deed on death? When I die, it goes to the other broker without that. And y'all, if you're not in the business, 48 to 72 hours is a lifetime when your listing is gone.
Right.
And the contract is gone and the sale is gone, and you have to tell somebody, I'm sorry, but you cannot close on your mom's estate because my broker died and I no longer have a license. It's huge.
It is huge.
It is.
We made a pact at the end of last week that in this meeting, we would not answer your original question, which is it rulemaking or legislative? Because we think we know the answer, and it's almost always wrong.
Your Honor, can I treat this as a hostile witness?
I feel like they were back in the office, like cutting their hands, making blood.
Yeah, a blood pact. what do you call it? Blood
The microphone.
So we can get that, what we can do with that is, okay, it's an initiative, so now let's make a plan to figure out what's required
And I
to
know
solve that
there's a
problem.
lot of broker issues, but that to me is the biggest one.
Very practical.
Yeah.
And
Especially for
especially,
those brokers who are, if they're sponsoring agents, they're sponsoring them in their license number and not in an LLC. I mean, it's just.
even in an LLC.
It still
Same thing.
takes, that's
But I
all.
mean, yeah, I know, it still takes time, but at least you have the mechanism in the LLC for a substitute broker, if you're smart.
So basically create a solution that allows for an immediate second in line of
Yes.
some sort.
If you
Okay.
can do it with a title and avoid murk, you can certainly do it with a license.
Do we need more on that, or do we have what we need?
I think all of those broker responsibility initiatives are what people have been asking for.
Yeah, so we'll walk through those too. I think he just brought up some broker succession first, because I know the exec committee's been asking about that as well. So, okay, I think we've got what we need on broker succession. So we've got under here, and this is up for discussion. These are just the notes we took, which is continue efforts, because we've been working on broker responsibility, continue those efforts through the Broker Responsibility Advisory Committee. Are there any specific items you want to pass their way? I'm going to say that. And now I'm going to also look at the bullet underneath, which has some of the issues that I mentioned yesterday that the BRWG has recommended the BRAC take up. So broker associates, delegated supervisors, team leads, number of people who can be supervised by one person. And then a little bit of a sub bullet saying, well, let's identify what the issues are in the industry. And I will say, from having had conversations about broker associates, about teams, about all of this stuff, this is an area where it would be super helpful to really tell us exactly what you want to discuss. Because we'll hear things like broker associates, it's a huge problem. But on our end, from a regulatory standpoint, we're not seeing a huge problem. And that, I'm not saying that there's not a problem, but we need to know exactly what problems, what issues you want us to look at and try to fix.
I have two,
Yes.
and I think that they're administrative, but I don't really know. Number one, if a broker associate is affiliated with my brokerage, it should show up on the website the same way it shows up on their IABS. Number two, if a disciplinary action is taken against a broker associate that's affiliated with my brokerage, I should be included in that email chain.
Agreed.
That's it.
If we get
That's all I
them
got.
associated with you, then I think that takes care of the second one.
Right, it should.
I mean, it could.
I don't know.
Well, so you're establishing a regulatory relationship between the two, like essentially the broker that they affiliate with, the broker associates affiliated, I don't know, I said that wrong, you
Yes.
know what I mean?
It goes back to defining it.
Well, that might be one of the solutions, right? But there's not a relationship there in statute. So they have the same license, the same regulatory responsibility. So if you've got a broker associate who, let's say, for whoever, I'll just say for Commissioner Brown's brokerage, if he's got broker associates and the broker associate is the subject of a complaint, that complaint is against the broker associate, and it is very rare. I mean, there has to be like independent acts that tie in the brokerage, the sponsoring broker, well, it's not sponsoring broker, the brokerage, I'll just say, to that complaint, because when we hit a broker, that's who we're disciplining, right? So a broker associate holds that same license. Just because they affiliate with the brokerage, that doesn't create a different regulatory relationship.
No, but it will.
Right.
Bet your ass I'm gonna get sued.
And so that's, okay, but look,
But that's civil.
that's.
I know it is, but
So the-
we should know about it ahead of time.
And that might be a policies and procedures issue. Ultimately, I don't know. I think if you need to, this is one, if there's going to be it depends on what you want. So we want it spelled out what it is sort of ideally you want in terms of consumer protection and regulatory. We talk about liability, and I get that because you guys are in that business, right? And it's like, well, if this broker associate who's, under me, I'm definitely getting sued. But from a regulatory standpoint, actually, it seems almost better for you because you're not involved in whatever discipline is
It's gonna be
happening.
involved.
You're gonna be blind.
No, because that's.
Well, from a regulatory.
But from a consumer protection standpoint, yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not saying that all my broker associates are geniuses who are really great professionals, but all you have to do is be in the industry for 4 years, fulfill some points and some education, and you can get a broker's license. If that person gets a complaint against them as, for lack of a better term, their sponsoring broker, I should know about it.
Do you put that in your policies and procedures?
Yes,
Yeah, but that's not enough.
it's
No,
not.
it's not
But-
enough.
Why is it not enough? I'm not challenging, I'm just curious. Because that's what we keep answering this with, and I don't think it,
He may be like an exception, not the norm. It's
I'm not sure I
rampant.
follow the policies.
But what's-
I don't.
I mean, people,
Well, the
first of
difference,
all, being a
And if a
broker
consumer
associate,
has
you
an
can
issue
work
with
with
somebody that
multiple
might
people.
I should know
That's
about it.
just not good. I mean, we ran across one, recall us talking about, that works for a big company and running her own company on the side, and you don't know who's working for who, or what's going on. I
But,
mean,
but ultimately, if you're working for one broker doing something on the side and that other broker is not responsible for that, at least there needs to be an affiliation, with who you work with.
I think that-
If not regulatory, at least consumer
Yes.
I
protection.
think that the simple answer is, they put me on their IABS.
Yeah.
That's right.
That relationship is created by virtue of that.
And it's relationship, maybe not regulatory, but
but what happens
relationship.
with the person like we were talking about that works for one, has her own, running her own agents over here, using this person's stuff over here? You don't know.
Well, the thing is that the other mechanism presumably would be an independent contractor agreement, which again, I'm not saying they, but I am saying that, if that language is such that, when you sign up an associate broker, and if you don't want them, which I wouldn't, but let's just say you don't want them working for other
Right.
brokerages, you could certainly, deal with that in the independent contractor agreement. Now, is that as effective? Probably not. But
If your
think it's
company name is
exposure
on
to
that
the consumer.
contract for that
Right.
person, you're gonna
The
get taken
IABS
out.
is-
Right. but
Unless you're a
Trust me, I am
I just, to be very
painfully
clear,
aware.
it's not TREC that's taking you down.
Right.
We'll worry about
So-
track.
But
No, no,
gotta
yeah,
be-
we just-
I get
it's a
it.
civil,
I understand the civil implication, but
And so,
but that IABS to me is
disciplinary actions
reason
take-
enough right there.
I think that's the
the
one.
TREC goes after the individual broker, not the brokerage ever, right?
If I
If
were
it's a broker, if it's a broker associate,
Right.
yes, you're
Broker
correct. They
associate.
stop at that broker license.
It's not like a brokerage that has 5 broker associates and there's a complaint. It's not like the brokerage gets the disciplinary action. You go to the individual broker.
Exactly.
exactly, so
Responsible.
that's, and
The
so,
But
not all bad.
But the problem with that is that you have a consumer that's upset, obviously. That individual broker gets the complaint, but I never know about it, and this person's upset with me.
And from a consumer standpoint,
They're gonna come for
I
you. They will come for the entire brokerage.
No, I understand, but from a regulatory standpoint, I could
So-
jump in and help out with that early if I knew about it.
right,
Right.
and that's the thing.
but so I just want to make sure, I don't have a position on this, except that we've got to separate the sort of the civil concerns from the regulatory concerns. And if you want a change in how broker associates are regulated, then we've got to get a statutory change that establishes a broker associate, that's subject to different requirements, that has to be attached in a complaint. I think it'd be interesting to hear what the feedback is overall on that, because, like I said, if the brokerage is not implicated in the regulatory on the regulatory side of that, and then all of a sudden they are, I think you're gonna see some feedback there too of like, well, wait,
So
why?
I don't wanna know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know I keep referring to this, but I'm gonna read you what some other states have, and this is how they do this. It just says, a real estate broker who does not have an office under the broker's own name, but is affiliated with another licensed broker and performs service similar to that of a salesperson, must not at any time act independently as a broker and shall not perform any real estate service without full consent and knowledge of the broker's supervising broker. The designated broker shall at all times be responsible for the action of the affiliated broker associate to the same extent as though the affiliated broker were an affiliated salesperson.
That's great. I mean, but,
Yeah,
I mean, that's what you essentially have in your IC agreement right now, maybe.
I see
that's-
agreement.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
think
Which is different.
legislatively,
Yeah.
they're gonna take the broker associate and put them on the same level as a salesperson. I do
That's
not
what
see
it does.
that.
It basically creates a supervisory relationship
I do
from a
not see that.
regulatory standpoint.
I think consumer protection, if we can get the broker associated somewhere underneath the brokerage as far as a contact,
The discipline.
then without being regulatory, I think I think we can get that done.
Well, and I think that
I don't
would be a
think-
great step in the direction because, to Chance's point, the consumer thinks they're dealing with the brokerage. Right? I mean, that's,
And theoretically, they are.
and theoretically they are.
That's right.
And it's on the, IBS, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, I think that a notice to the broker at a minimum is in the consumer's best interest, right?
But if.
I mean, to the brokerage.
If it has to be regulatory and they're identified with me and they get a complaint and then they don't tell me and I find out, then they have violated our IC agreement. And as a broker, I'm sitting there saying, you're right. They're running with scissors. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And a plausible deniability.
But if the
Well,
broker
okay.
somehow got involved in it on the front end versus finding out on the back end, it could go away earlier. I mean, it may not end up being a mountain.
But legislative would have to reduce the broker associate to a sales supervisory salesperson.
They're not really,
I
you're
do not
just
see that
defining what it
happening.
is. You're not really
So could
reducing
we,
anything.
would it require a regulatory change?
I think it would.
No, I know for that, but I'm just asking if we were to say, look, as an associate broker, if you become involved in a complaint, regulatory complaint, let's say in this case, then there's a notice requirement to who you're, the company.
Yeah.
Not
Not a
Well, it's
sponsor
not a
technically,
sponsor,
but
yeah.
affiliation.
Affiliation.
Association.
To those with
whatever.
whom you are
I mean,
affiliated.
I guess,
And if you got multiple sponsors to multiple.
Yeah, so right now, if you go on well, not now because everything's redacted now, but prior to September 1st, if you had gone on to Joe Blow Broker Associate for whatever ABC brokerage, the only reason you would know that Joe Blow works there is if you happened to know the business address of ABC brokerage, because that's what you had to change, was your business address. That was it. There was no other way for a consumer to tell that Joe Blow was actually part of ABC brokerage.
Unless they had the IEBS.
Unless they had the IABS. And so if we're already requiring it on the IABS, why not put it here and copy the broker if they get a disciplinary action?
So why wouldn't we give this to BRAC and say,
Fix
give us
this.
the pros and cons and give us valid information so we can make a informed decision?
Well, we totally can. I can already, the conversations that are happening right now are statutory changes, which is fine. But is the point, are the 2 points we're looking at? The notice of discipline is it just a notice? Or are they included in the discipline?
No.
notice, notice.
Okay, that's complicated, I'll just say.
It all is.
Because there's not a relationship, there's not a regulatory relationship, and a notice that someone is potentially getting into trouble is harder, right? We've talked about this at the workshop level before. I'm not saying anything, but if the issue is you want notice do you want inclusion into the complaint? I mean, do you want?
Are
the
you saying
name?
they're responsible?
Yeah, what, because why else are you notifying them?
Because it's your name on the business that they're working for.
I don't think it
But
should be
why does
treated,
TREC?
I don't think it should be treated any differently than if a sales agent
I
got
don't
a
either.
complaint.
I agree.
Agreed.
Okay, so that's a different,
But, but they're on, back to the IABS thing. I mean, issue. I mean, is that, I mean, they are, connected in that way.
Yep.
Right? I mean, does that matter?
I mean, it's in,
Do you
brokers,
want
it's in
the
legal one right now.
brokers to be different? Like, if you're an associated broker, do you want them to be different than the sales agents? Like, should you just put them in the same category? Like, if you're a broker who works under someone else, you really are just a fancy sales agent?
I wouldn't want my broker associates to be working for multiple people or having their own business
But
on the
if you have
side or
someone
whatever
running
else.
multiple people, that's more of a policy issue.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
That is,
I
for
agree.
sure, yes.
Yeah, that's
But at
between
this
you
point,
and
they're
them.
allowed to do it.
They're
And,
allowed to do it.
and
Yeah,
all
by
of us at
statute,
this
for
table
sure.
may not allow it, but they're the biggies that are taking over everything, they allow it.
Well, are you wanting to stop that practice? I mean, and does
I
the
don't think it's the
know?
best thing for the consumer.
No,
But
it's not.
what is the solution?
I don't necessarily know that I agree with that, because what if I'm an agent who has lived my entire life in Lubbock and my spouse gets transferred to Houston? But I want to keep selling for Remax of Lubbock. I just also want to sell for Remax of Houston. I don't have a problem with limiting that if that person has a broker's license. Unless one of those two brokerages policies and procedures prohibits it.
Mobility.
Or if I get old and I want to retire, but I want to keep my property management,
Yeah.
and I merge with you, and you're a franchise, but my property management is separate, I'm still working with you, but my property management is under my associate broker's license.
Right.
That is a business relationship between me and you,
Right.
not TREC.
It
If
is a-
my property management is up, I get nailed.
How do you get paid?
I get paid through that brokerage.
Except
Yeah,
for the
see, we have a-
management piece.
Follow the money.
Yeah, no, and that's where the brokerage policies, which we've spent time on in that regard, is gotta be enforced and,
Correct.
you're gonna, now, I will say, back to the earlier comment, there's a lot of things that are probably allowable regulatory wise that we don't allow
From a-
internally.
Right,
Which
correct.
is great.
And that seems to be kind of what we're talking about here too. I mean, which puts it on the broker to enforce whatever their policies are.
So
right?
if a broker associate does not inform you of a disciplinary action, right? You'd want something in that TREC can come and say, you didn't inform your broker sponsor that you had a disciplinary case.
Like a check.
No, I want
Yeah.
them to inform me.
Which I have it in
Or
my
have to
policies
deal
and
with that.
procedures.
No, but
You want
we're
TREC
talking
to-
about it, what she's asking is you want
I
TREC
just want
to
to know
be able
about it.
to
I just want to be
enforce
informed of the
the
disciplinary
notification of a disciplinary action from a broker associate to the brokerage sponsor.
No, I think they want us to provide the notice
Yes.
to
That's what it
the
says.
broker.
Oh,
The brokerage.
I just want to, I just copied me on the email.
Right.
Broker responsibility wise too, we could be helping our agent find their way out of this.
Yeah.
Helping your broker associate.
Yeah, that's
Correct.
what.
So is there consensus around, so there's two kind of issues up here. It seems like there is consensus around this desire to show affiliation for broker associates on the website. Is there consensus there?
Yes.
Yes.
And then on the second one, would like to be notified when there's a potential disciplinary action. Is
And
there consensus?
I like that if we can put without screwing up the regulatory relationship between the associate broker and broker and the
Okay,
responsibility.
I agree with you.
No, I'm serious.
No, I agree.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree.
So that's cake and eat it too.
Yes, the benefits, but not.
Literally, I just want you to CC me on the email. That's it.
So,
They're like, yeah.
I mean, I don't think if we tie the two together, it will go anywhere.
What do you mean?
Like if we say, okay, you notify me, but I don't want to lessen the broker associate liability or the regulation. So maybe it's just a simple broker associates, you owe a duty to notify your who's ever in charge of the company. I don't want them to lose their liability and me take it on. Yes, if there's a way where you can notify me, great. But I don't wanna muddy the waters with the regulatory. Because I think if we go regulatory and we lower them to nothing but a sales agent, yeah, it'll, yeah. I mean, in New Mexico, everybody's a broker.
Right.
Everybody.
Okay.
And then you're a qualifying broker, but you're still a broker. And I don't want to get to that point. And that's what this would do.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got the issues identified.
So the notice, whenever a complaint comes through, right? The next step would be the investigative process, right? Which is to notify the respondent. And when you notify the respondent, you notify the sponsoring broker, right?
Yeah,
That makes a relationship.
well, I'm gonna say, I will say I don't know how you do that. I think that's gonna tie into a few different areas of law, but we can this is something we discussed and ultimately there hadn't been the appetite. And I know Ame's got something to say, which is probably more profound in terms of enforcement.
Are there any confidentiality issues?
Well, this is what we discussed, right? Like this would be different. You'd have to have a regulatory relationship for us to start providing notice of someone's complaint, right? I mean, are they included in the investigation? You know, if you've got a complaint filed, are you already there? Are you already at the point where?
Or is it in the
quash it?
process, if you look at it at the complaint versus the final disposition of the complaint,
Yeah.
right? In the case of like Mr. Lopez, he's the inspector, but you know, the agreed order is the notice at the end.
Well, yes, but it's also, I mean, we have brokers and agents, like that is a relationship where people are included. You know, if the agent botches it, they're gonna bring in the broker and that's established.
And that complaint, notification and all this goes to the broker automatically with the sales agent, right?
Yeah, but when,
Yeah.
we'll take the broker example and let's say they're doing the investigation. So they're gonna ask for the file and all, and they're gonna see this IABS, right? And in that is going to have the
Chain of
brokerage.
command, yeah.
So
Mark, when your agents
I
get,
guess, I mean, I don't,
when your agents get offers for other,
I'm sorry.
when your agents get offers from other brokerages, I ask for the IABS for every transaction I'm on.
Mhm.
Like many times I ask, and just this week I said, I need all of these other forms or whatever for my file. And they're like, nobody ever asked for this. I never have to give any of this. So they never give me stuff.
I wouldn't
If
do that.
you asked me that, I would tell you no.
I ask for it on every single
I would
file,
not
so I
give it
know
to you.
who's with.
All that contact information is on the contract.
So
The
not, but they
supervisor and the
only,
brokerage.
I mean, no, I'm just saying for even a broker associate wouldn't have a supervisor.
On IBS, they do.
No, I'm just saying.
no,
he
but
said
no,
it's on
no,
the
I'm saying when
contract.
TREC is investigating, they would ask for all of that, right? Or no?
It depends on the situation, but like when we initially get the complaint, we may not have, like, I mean.
Well, you wouldn't have it
We
maybe.
wouldn't necessarily know that they're a broker or associate.
Yeah, yeah.
When we get the complaint in.
Right, but I'm just saying,
Broker, that's all we care about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if you were asking for the file,
right.
would you expect that kind of thing to be included, like an IABS or no?
Typically, yes.
Which would then list the broker.
Which would they, yeah,
Right.
All right, can we move the affiliation
that's all.
forward? And, I mean,
I mean,
I don't know how we do disciplinary action.
If you want us to tackle it, we can tackle it. It's.
Drill down a little bit on that.
Yeah.
don't dial back,
Don't
drill
dial
down.
Yeah. So.
That's what we were confusing yesterday.
It's me. I am not good at phrases. So that's fine. Okay, so we've got this. And do you want it to go to BRAC or do you want us to work on it because you've identified it and you don't necessarily need the feedback on these two items? We workshopped these two items maybe last year at this time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, last year we heard the results of that, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, because those were recommendations from BRWG. And this does seem, I will say that seems to be what everyone dials down to, because we hear broker associates, it's a problem, it's out of control. And then the question is, well, what is out of control? Like, what is the problem? And it seems to be, well, if I have a broker associate, I want to be notified if they're going to be disciplined. And I need to see who broker associates affiliate with on the website. Like, those are the problems.
Also, they're using my business name on their stuff. If there's a problem, I want to know. Because
Well, that's the,
my dad's on the door.
Right, but that's your business decision too, right? Like, this is, some of this is business decisions.
Right, but I want somebody to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, your broker associate's doing this.
And
I
they're
don't
on the
think you need to be
IABS.
aware.
Right, and that's right, you're on that IABS for that reason, I
But
believe.
you won't have the IBS.
Correct.
They
They're
will
saying
not
they
have
don't get
that.
it. I get the
Yeah, but you won't.
Right,
Their
exactly.
client will, their
Right.
customer will.
Correct. Correct.
And they'll know
So,
who to call.
and there's posting requirements and things like that.
well, and
So-
chances are, in the real world, you're already aware of the situation because they perhaps have called to complain because they knew who you were.
Of course.
And so,
I just don't want to minimize.
you know, so I mean, you don't know that it's gone to this level, right? Maybe or whatever, but you know, when it shows back up, it's like, well,
I
at least you
think,
know what.
yeah, it sounds like we want to move these forward. I'm looking at you to see what you think of. Do you want, like, maybe internally for us to develop this a little bit, maybe take it to the executive committee before we lob something back to BRAC? I feel like we were just in
We've
that.
already made those.
Yeah, I don't think giving it back to them makes any sense.
Not without more information.
Right.
And this is definitely a stand on your head sort of scenario. Like, there doesn't seem to be a solution that's really perfect within
I'd say that's.
our structure. But we could poke at it.
Consensus, work on those two, get a little better path before we send it back
Yeah.
to.
And we can look at what the
BRAC.
statutory options would be, probably in a way that's, well, definitely in a way that's different than what an advisory committee would do. And then ultimately that definition works its way through a lot of people, right? But we can do this and explore this and walk through. I think fundamentally it's establishing a regulatory relationship to some extent. It's a collection of information we haven't collected previously, et cetera, but we can look at that. And I know we had put the website collection of information, we had put that on the list. And I think disciplinary action had gone sort of back burner / less well received because it's complex, but we can dive into that.
Now, on the
Would the-
website, go.
So would this solution be just an addition to statute that says if you have a broker's license and you so choose to affiliate with another broker for doing business, you essentially become a fancy sales agent?
Well, that's the definition way of doing it.
Which is what,
That's-
you know, that's.
And all
Kind of
rules
Leslie's
then, and all rules for sales agents then
Probably
apply.
not that simple, but yes,
Less-
there's probably more than just that change.
Yeah, but-
Because it's also a collection of specific information.
Several different.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to look at it, I mean, you want to look at it in totality, because we've got to get with enforcement and talk about like, hey, well, what would that look like? We need to look at what the rules are as it relates to, open investigations. If you're not a party to it, like, that stuff's confidential by law.
Yeah.
And so the complaint is not. So those are the bigger questions, but we can look into that. If these are the issues, we can take and run, and get back with you on what that looks like. It seems like people are generally nodding their heads.
So,
Yes.
Okay.
on the website, I want to warn you. When you start putting things on the website that's unrelated to who we are as a regulatory body, we're going to get more requests for more things added to the website. And the one that always comes up is a designation for a property manager. Can't you just tell people who is doing property management? And we've long said no, because you know what? They have a license, that's sales agent or broker, that's what they do, instead of carving out these other things. So I'm not saying that for any sort of conversation, other than to just warn you that that may be part of this.
Yeah, we'd want a specific authority, I think. Anytime you start asking
Well, that's
people
like
for new
carving out
things, they're gonna say, well,
commercial
why?
May or may not be a good idea, but you know, I mean, that's.
Okay. Commercial
Okay.
channel.
So now we've got, so that looks like Broker Associates is gonna live with us.
Mhm.
And then, we've got the delegated supervisors, team leads, number of people who can be supervised by one person. What does that mean specifically? What do you want? What would you like? If you would like anything at all.
I don't see it. I mean, that's like me telling someone you can't have more than 10 listings. I mean, I talked to a friend last night. They have 200 agents. They have 5 supervisors, but they do make all their team leaders also be a designated supervisor. But their policy and procedure says, really, when it comes to the decisions, you go to these 5. And they run a very good office. 1,500 to 1,800 closings a year, 2,000 a year. I mean, a very good office, and it's structured. And I just, limiting to me is you're getting into business models. Because there's really good ones and there's really bad ones.
Agreed.
I think that's overreach.
Agreed.
So strike
Okay.
that one in totality.
And team leaders are already defined. If you supervise, you need to be a supervisor.
Right, right.
Is there
Okay.
consensus?
I think what they were talking about for delegated supervisors is you can get your license today and be a delegated supervisor tomorrow and lead a team tomorrow and have no idea what you're doing.
Well, but that goes back to the broker.
So, and then some states require a team lead to be a broker.
I'm not, yeah,
But
but
let me go back on that to the letter that we got at the very beginning when Scott first opened the broker responsibility working group. We got a letter from a gentleman who had been a managing broker in New Mexico for 21 years, got a divorce, moved to Texas, and couldn't get a broker's license.
welcome to Texas.
But there's certainly no reason why somebody in that position couldn't be a delegated supervisor day one because of the experience he has.
Right,
managing
exactly.
realtors.
Okay.
Okay,
Strike
so
that.
that's struck 4 initiatives. All right, what's next? We're going paperless. We're looking, I know we talked about payments. There's also on the paper files to electronic. That
Yeah,
seems to fall
I think
under
we-
the same. We're good.
We got
We're
that
good.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, we're headed that direction.
Okay.
To the 2000s.
Yeah, thank you.
We're close on paper files, the
Yeah.
paper applications and then the paper payments. Yeah.
Okay, website database. So I'm gonna read the bullets here. Needs for new website, needs for database front end and back end, process for checking LLC and DBAs initially and renewals, agent/broker/LLC information provided to local boards.
I would like, and this is probably staff, the difference between an LLC, a DBA, and also known as. I think everybody confuses those 3.
Yeah, you're
I
right.
really do.
That's a
Now
good
you're gonna
one.
have to have the difference of a registered.
Yeah,
So what,
but that could be an ESAC issue for a legal 1 or legal 2 update.
Yeah,
Yeah, so are you basically saying like some mechanism to communicate to each other and then the rest of the world, the differences between those?
I think if you're gonna go do an assumed name or something on our website, it should be, do you need an assumed name or an LLC or a DBA?
or
Which one is
also
right
known
for you?
as.
Yeah,
DBA.
and do you
like a
want
wizard.
a different display of any,
I think you need a display, whether it's a registered or a business entity.
Which one is right for me?
So is the problem we're solving the confusion?
The problem is it says John Doe Realty, John Doe Real Estate, Chelsea Buckles, designated broker, and it says DBAs, and everyone, your agent goes by
The team.
Kestner team, you know, bonus Bob or what. They have all these different DBAs they advertise with, and TREC wants to know what you're advertising with, because you're not using Scott Kestner, you're using whatever. And so they list those DBAs, and are those DBAs registered with the county? Are you just notifying TREC, look, they advertise under this. This advertisement is under my brokerage. And I think that's what the intent was, not that that DBA had to be registered with the county, that they're just advertising as
Or holding out.
power team.
Or holding out as.
Right, yeah.
That's
And-
what we need to know.
Right,
for
and so,
purposes
yeah,
of-
I think it all started
Advertising.
because that's the way they're advertising, so TREC needs to know how you're advertising.
TREC needs to know who
But I
to
will
reach
also
out
tell you,
to.
Thursday of last week, we did an information session with our general counsel about these registered business entities. And half the people on there, because, you know, realtors overthink everything. Half the people on there were like, so I need to start putting this LLC on my signs and stuff. And I'm like,
No, that's the last thing.
no, you don't have to do anything other than just register the entity.
And I'm
You don't
asking.
need to show up anywhere else.
Well, it shouldn't, right? It's gonna help.
Right.
Yeah.
If I have a DBA, is it supposed to be with the county? On TREC's website?
You can do it with the SOS now.
Yeah,
And it's
Well,
for
I
the
mean,
whole
Secretary of
state.
State, but is it,
Yeah.
am I putting it on TREC because I'm advertising or because I actually did a DBA with the Secretary of State? Is the DBA should be called also known as, also advertised as?
So I think we collect the DBAs, you're right, for purposes of advertising. That's why we collect them. I will look at Denise and say, I believe we have them say, they fill out the stuff showing, yes, I have the right to use this DBA, et cetera. The registering a DBA at the Secretary of State is not a huge effort. Nor is it checked, nor do you have exclusive rights to any, I mean, it's
Trademark.
it's essentially like a public notice.
Yeah.
And we collect it for purposes of advertising.
But all I do is say, this person is advertising under this DBA. Nowhere do I show, I don't know, I'm just a small broker from El Paso. I do about 70% of those don't even have any Secretary of State.
Right.
They're just saying, I am now advertising as this.
Well, so here's my
Here's
question,
our-
because I
here's
might
our
be doing this
expert.
wrong. I might be doing this wrong. If I've got ABC team, I register ABC team under the team name registration. If they wouldn't file a DBA with the SOS on that, I don't even know about it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Right.
We're doing it for the
Oh,
advertising, not
All
the
you need,
Secretary of
all you need to
State.
know is that when
I
you
just do
go
the
to
team
the
name
TREC
registration.
website and look up ABC team,
Yeah,
it should be affiliated with the brokerage.
Right,
right, and it is, under the team name registration.
Sometimes
But
it's
if they
not.
have a DBA, I don't even ask them for that document.
That's where you go look for ABC team and you can't
See, we're
find it.
doing, we
Then it
are
is
doing
not
that.
right.
It creates a lot of,
Seems redundant.
Can probably walk
well,
us
it may be, I'm
through
thinking.
Okay,
Yeah,
talk
so
to it.
the paper
I don't
form
know.
which mirrors the
I don't know what
online,
that is.
name
I don't either.
management
I bet it
tool
does
that only
raise
brokers
good
can access.
Yeah.
And the form is designed to only be submitted by a broker. The requirement is list each assumed business name. And for each name, the broker should maintain a copy of any documentation permitting the use of each name. So we at TREC are not collecting.
You're doing it right.
what they have.
I know that's what we're doing, but I was like.
And that is what we're having the broker, sign, attest to.
So, so if somebody were to call, say, hey, I looked at ABC and they're not on the TREC website. You have an unregistered entity operating, right? Effectively?
I mean, that sounds like it would go to enforcement,
Yeah,
as a complaint.
Potentially, yeah, right.
But,
Yeah.
but
Because
Leslie's
that
concern
means
is
that
DBA is not
somebody's
a
using a
road
name
Right,
that's not affiliated with a
Right, it's
brokerage
not-
or registered
it's
with
not.
TREC. That means
because there's
TREC
confusion
doesn't
into
know-
what each one needs.
TREC doesn't know that this team is operating out there selling or doing brokerage services.
Advertising.
Right.
Yeah.
And
So-
so that's, the spirit is to find out all the aliases, all the assumed names under a brokerage,
right.
regardless of whether it's registered or not.
Yeah.
Maybe,
For the-
but here's another example. I have an agent who does not go by his given last name. He goes by a radio name he had 20 years ago, but people know him by that radio name. And so he's got an assumed name registered, but that doesn't show up anywhere on my website or on my search.
My daughter
Shouldn't
is.
it be an alternate name as well?
My dad's.
Yeah.
That could be added as an alternate name. We always use an example of a license holder whose nickname was Scooter. It
Right.
wasn't on any of the documentation, but that was
Yeah.
the name used in business, the name used to advertise. And how do we get that added to the database so that a consumer could find Scooter? Because
Right.
that's how they're gonna find this license holder. And it was through providing an alternate name.
Yeah, alternative knowledge.
Scooter provide that
Jim
alternate.
But that doesn't need to show up
Scooter can
under
Provide an alternate.
my
Yeah, it's so
brokerage
Scooter.
name.
Right.
It would show up
Okay.
as him and individually underneath mine.
So it sounds like just from this conversation that
A lot of
the
confusion.
swirling of confusion around all these different things.
Summer, we need
The
an
issue
article.
might be just clarifying the difference and what the requirements are. Is it possible?
Yeah, so, and I think this goes in line with kind of our conversation yesterday, but it seems like there might just be a misunderstanding of what the advertising rules are when it comes to DBAs, when it comes to alternate names.
Yep.
And so maybe that's a communications piece,
Right.
or something like
I
that.
think the problem is too, is the local boards gets it messed up because, yes, there's confusion, but then our website doesn't really give them all the correct information. Like one of those cases we looked at yesterday, 1 through 4, still has listing broker by the name that's not supposed to be there. So I think it's also a communication piece, and I know I've talked to HAR, and it's a syncing mechanism that's missing.
Okay, which seems like, it seems like that's a new database. Sort of.
And that would be very helpful.
I don't know what that means.
That's how the
I know
two
Steve
database
Rapp was in the
Okay,
conversation.
that's like computer blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah.
And I have all that communication, but I don't know.
That would be helpful if these, if particularly the
They're
big
having a
boards
problem
could
getting
hook up.
our feed too about expired and inactive and all that.
Okay, so an initiative could be to clarify and kind of minimize the confusion around, I'm gonna botch this, the advertising requirements for team name, DBA. Do you include explanation of LLC and other types of entities? I mean, is
But
that
my question
completely separate?
is, just one little communication. If your DBA is registered on TREC, is it supposed to be registered with the county or Secretary of State?
I don't know.
Okay, so
Well,
that
She read the
might need to be
definition that it
part.
does.
Well, no, she says has the ability. Do you interpret that as being?
But
that
a
again?
DBA is a legal name. If they're not registered, then
And
they're
they're
not a
supporting
Have a
DBA.
DBA.
So there is a rule that says before a broker, and this is part of the advertising rule. Before a broker, associated broker, or sales agent sponsored by a broker starts using an assumed business name of the broker in an advertisement, the broker must register the name of the commission on a form approved by the commission and provide written evidence of legal authority to use the assumed business name in Texas,
See, that,
such as a registration of the name with the Secretary of State or county clerk's office.
that needs to be
That's it.
communicated.
So we're not,
That's a
so
communication.
at this moment, we have not been collecting that.
Don't they
No, but we
serve-
attest to that,
But
like we collected,
Right,
but
that
then we
just said-
attest the.
Right, but that just said that we as TREC are supposed to be collecting it,
No.
correct?
No, and I think it says the broker
It says
collects
But the
it,
broker provides it.
provides it, or you,
And then on the form, we clarify, and this is similar online, that the broker's attesting that they maintain a copy of the
not,
documentation.
but that's different. You're saying doesn't
Yes.
provide it to TREC is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm
That's
a little bit, brokers don't even know they're attesting to it.
Well, that may be.
They're just,
And
We
that
only
it
have two.
And it expires after 10 years.
Well, that's a different, yeah, that's probably a problem.
it's one of those things where
That's probably.
I'd rather them tell me the name that they're operating under
Right.
rather than checking whether it's registered or not, because that's the reality of what they're doing, right? And the spirit of that rule was to find out, okay, how many names is your brokerage operating?
Right.
And when you go on the website, look it up, it's gonna tie you to a brokerage, as opposed to
Correct.
operate under a name that's not registered with TREC,
Right,
that
but-
you wouldn't be able to tie it to a brokerage.
but
How many
legally, we
hometown
can't
realty
call it a
teams are there in the
DBA
state of
on the
Texas?
website if it's not
15,000.
registered.
That's their issue, right? That's their risk of
Right.
operating under a name that they shouldn't be, right?
No, but
But-
I'm saying on our website, we
Right.
call it a DBA, but if it's not really a DBA, we're advertising false information.
And again, I think this was to help the public find the broker.
Right.
Now we're realizing,
Responsible.
I bet 50% of the DBAs are not
Registered.
like they're
Or
supposed to.
expired.
And so and then if we look down to consumer harm on that one versus
I don't know
having
that there is any,
them
if it's a
listed on our website and having that tie to the broker, and how much effort do you want to put into, I mean, you could change your system for verifying. I think we've talked about this. You certainly can, if that's the initiative you want. It takes people to do that.
I think it's more of an enforcement issue of when there is a complaint, that we need to start asking for documentation.
I don't think we track it. I think we communicate, broker, you're supposed to have this. And if it goes to enforcement and they don't have it, then,
But why?
but do what?
For what purpose?
Like for an LLC,
No,
like
no,
we
for a
need to.
DBA.
No, for DBA.
Right.
My bigger,
What's the purpose?
my bigger thing would be from an
What's the
enforcement
purpose of
standpoint
them
is, does the
proving or
true
not
name
proving
show
that
up
it's
on the
registered?
website?
Because they
Who
attested
cares if
it
it's a
was.
DBA or a TBA?
When
I
I'm
know- I
registered, I
understand that,
attested.
but you don't, since it's
Yes.
registered with TREC.
There's also not a renewal.
I'm just saying this, what difference does it make if they register as a DBA or not?
Well,
You still know that they're holding out as.
Correct, as
whatever
long
it
as
is.
the consumer takes the.
Did I mention that a realtor sometimes
Right,
does the
that's-
same thing?
The
That's a spirit, so they can connect it to a broker.
Everything.
So
okay.
I think
why would we care if they're registered or not?
Well, that's,
Because it's part of the rules.
This might be a good workshop. I mean,
so. That's something that the chair had mentioned, which is maybe as part of the February workshop is, I'm imagining Denise doing this presentation of, here are all of the things, here's what we require, here's what the rules are, et cetera. I mean, it'll be a joint effort.
Team sport,
Not just, but
so to
But
speak.
we can do that and start working through it. I think we have, this is what I'm hearing, which is one, we need clarification and communication on the advertising rules as it relates to the DBAs, the
team names also. right?
team names, and then as a little bit of an aside, that assumed, not assumed, alternate names, scooters of the world. And then it seems like there is a concern about the DBAs themselves and whether they are, this is an enforcement issue you want us to start tackling, whether it's a change you want to make to that assumed name tool and what is provided. And knowing that if that is the direction you want to go in, that's going to be an increase in staff resources and time, and you're going to start to see some lagging, and why you want to do it, like what's the consumer protection fund? And there may be, I'm not saying there's not. So maybe that discussion, we research, we look into, and then that's a workshop topic in February that we can do, and we do a little bit of the presentation, we can communicate in the interim. I know we've communicated this in at least the last broker responsibility. I know there's a section on this, but communications through the team.
I think a lot of it is also more so LLC and how people are getting paid or not paid, and whatever the names are saying that are registered as an LLC and not being checked.
What do you mean? Registered?
Like some of those cases yesterday, there weren't legit LLCs, and they have it on our website as an LLC, or they're not licensed, or, I mean, the way it's reported now, like the closing statement, oh, they said they weren't using this, which we know they were because it was on the closing statement, but staff doesn't look at the closing statement.
But when I renew an LLC, I have to show documentation that it's valid.
Correct. I'm saying if we get a complaint and it says that these people are using an LLC that's not registered, and staff's like, oh no, they weren't paid that way, which may change with this registration. Staff's not asking for the closing statement to see how it was paid.
Okay, well, that's only enforcement, yeah.
Correct.
Right, but right now, so what, we're gonna move to enforcement in a minute. But right now, I think I have captured the initiative, the possible initiative as it relates to the advertising, the names, right?
And how are we gonna tell the difference between registered and licensed?
Yeah, I mean, that, right, and that is something we're working on. I don't think the intent is to just do nothing with that or throw it all together. It's just how do you do it?
We're still working on that.
On the registration, which that's that pass through, let's just call it a pass through LLC registration, because I think that's what they most commonly are. So that is different, but yes, that's ongoing.
Let's move
Okay.
to enforcement.
Okay, so let's make sure. Agent, broker,
We didn't talk
LLC.
about
Okay.
website.
Okay. Needs for new website. And then needs for database front end and back end. Would anyone like to say what that means?
I think
That's-
that's feeding the local association is what,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Oh, that's the
I
front end,
actually
back
brought
end?
up
Yeah.
I actually brought up website just to have a working group. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot of meetings or whatever to say, just because we're in the industry and see what people are here and see what is needed, just to come together and go, okay, this is our new website, not the database portion as much. This is what people are looking on our website, and this is what would make it very interactive and good as a benefit for consumers and for
but that's staff.
the look and feel.
Yeah,
And so we can't just go look over any of the proof sheets or anything.
I mean, that's, I think it's staff.
I think that we want to have an effective website, and I think we can bake in some mechanism to ensure that it's functional for the industry and for consumers. And we can talk about what that looks like. It
And
makes me nervous to have a team of commissioners to do the administrative function.
And it's not that, it's just like looking at a proof of concept and seeing what is it you're doing. I mean, that's what,
I mean, our
companies do.
input is we want more articles, more videos and stuff that communicate true communication.
We'll work on a better picture.
And,
You want to make
But
sure
all
it's
of
a
our-
comprehensive approach to developing.
and all of our emails are commissioned.
Make it 25.
Yeah, maybe 20 minutes.
Just hearing that, it sounds, and I don't know that this is necessarily an initiative, but it sounds like there's a desire for a truly comprehensive approach to development of a new website that would involve some stakeholder input. I can't imagine there's not conversations at the commission level, just of like, here's what we're working on, here's what it looks like, maybe updates from summer, but the true development and all of that lies with the staff.
I mean, I've gone through so many different states' websites and the look and feel and how the ease of navigating around and just, excuse me, like we were talking about the AI yesterday, there's just things that we hope get included in ours that it would be nice to know what is being included.
Absolutely. And Summer, do you have, like, do you think if we can, if you can like provide us with your dreams, just however you'd like to give that to us, I think that would be great. And then I can guarantee that we will use all of the resources we have available. I just don't want to commit to what exactly that looks like in this moment. Do we have, what is it when you get people in a room?
Focus group.
Focus group,
Yeah,
thank
I was
you.
gonna say something like that. I think it would be important to have that built in. So I wasn't here the last time the website was updated, and I agree with you, Commissioner Lerner, that there's a lot that we could be doing that would be more intuitive and just look and feel better. And so, but that is a comprehensive process that we would absolutely need all sorts of user feedback on, not only license holders, but, you know, it's a resource for the public too. So we would need, I think, consumers as part of those conversations as well. So, I mean, I agree with you. I think it needs to, I would love to know specifics if there are things where it's like, I'm trying to find, I don't know, inspector stuff comes to mind, like, and I have a really hard time finding that, and I want that to be easier to find in the future, like, those sorts of things. Absolutely, I want to hear those.
Yeah,
things.
and that's what I'm referring to, and then just looking at all the different states' websites. I mean, you can pull stuff from every one of them and say, this is a great feature, I wish we had it.
Which is a lot of what you do when you do redesign websites.
Right,
There's a lot of looking at, well, what do I like about these other websites that I use that make it easy for me to find
Right.
the FAQs or search a term and things come up and.
But she can give her input, like, personally, right? I mean, that,
Right.
that.
Well, you could do a focus group at the Texas
Well, I'll tell you
Realtors
what.
meeting in February and just get a group
If
together.
you want to know what not to do,
And-
go to the Texas Department of Insurance. Try to work
A
with
lot
them.
of times designers give a proof of
Agora.
concept, and you can review the proof of
Agora.
concept.
Yeah.
In Colorado.
So, okay, it sounds like the website development process already tends to include what we're talking about. So maybe that's not an initiative so much as it is a project that Summer is working on and has the approach, and we
Full
understand.
transparency.
Full transparency, yes.
Of how it's going. And also, I mean, Tom, cause I can't do it without him, so.
Sure,
His
yeah.
team, so.
Okay, so is website database, we're good?
Yeah, you did the front end, back end,
Well, we can, yeah, I mean, and I know we just even in soliciting, we visited with associations on their desire to connect, like how they connect, what it looks like, what they need, so. Okay, let's go to, you wanna do enforcement matters or educational content?
Well, educational content, I mean, I think it's pretty quick. I think everybody really likes the broker responsibility on legal too. I don't know if it's initiative, more of a direction, try to create more and more in-house. You know, we have the staff, we have the resources. I don't think it needs to be a commission initiative as much as it is. I think if the commission is try to do more in-house.
Directive to us.
Right.
Knowing that it's
Directed.
supported, yeah, that
Right.
it's supported, that we move away a little bit from the way we've been doing it in the past to how we started to do it. And then I think honestly, even further of it being truly a TREC product.
Mhm.
And that way we're communicating what, the
And
commission wants.
And I think we do a great job with our writing group, including different people. But I think the final product more in-house.
One of the things that I would like some input and direction on specifically is, we develop the content and the course manuals, the instructor manuals, put all that together here. That's a process that years ago was heavily driven by A&M, but like Chair said, we've got these in-house resources now. We've been building them over time. One of the things that I personally would like to see out of the instructor training is more teaching how to teach as opposed to teaching the content. And with your blessing, that is a direction that I would like to go, because I think there's a responsibility for those who take these courses, primarily brokers, to know the content really, right? Like,
They
if
should
you're
know the
gonna
content.
teach this, then you should be pretty familiar with it. But what we also want to do in the instructor trainings is teach them how to engage and how to incorporate adult learning techniques
I agree with
and, online learning
Totally
tools if
agree
you're
with
gonna
that.
do that. So
100% agree.
with your blessing, I think. and
You just got it.
Go forward, young lady.
Yeah. Yeah, so the only thing I would say on that is,
Cool.
so I'll be here in 2 weeks for recertification at ABOR.
Uh-huh.
The one thing that I do like to hear when we go through those is when we do the case studies and things like that, is really hearing some of the backstory stuff. And I think that the students like hearing that. They like to see, kind of pull the curtain back a little and see who got in trouble for what. Like, they like that. So I wouldn't want to get away from that, but 100% like how to teach.
Well, I think we can do both.
Because man, you can sit through some boring
right.
stuff. Yeah, y'all are in charge.
Okay.
Thanks, Derek.
Take care.
He said, and I'm not coming back.
I'm coming back.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a consensus to take that and run with it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, go back to enforcement.
Okay, so enforcement matters. We've got criminal history, we've got background checks, we've got discipline, and we've got complaints. And I think what I would say again here is, let's identify what those words mean in terms of an initiative. Like, what action do you want? What problem are we solving?
I think this is gonna eventually be a workshop, but I would like more information on the social security check, if it's even possible.
Yep.
And I think probably more information on, the criminal history. I mean, I think they do a good job scrubbing it. Is there something we're missing because we're not doing the social security check?
Yeah, and we're basing that, I mean, I would imagine that conversation, I think we all heard it at the same time at Arello. And probably looking, I mean, somebody logged out some stats, but I don't know what those stats
There's
are.
a lot.
I never heard of social security check as being so we can look at that. That's certainly. We want to look at what that means. Do we have the authority to do it? What does it mean for the agency if we start pursuing that? What are the implications, the confidentiality requirements, that kind of a thing? But we can look at that. Is that something that?
I think that's the first step.
They said the FBI.
So for those of us that weren't there, could you give us just like?
This
the
guy
2
got
minute
up and
timer?
said, he was from some state, not Texas, so it doesn't really matter, but he said,
Nevada.
we're now doing social security criminal history background checks, and we're getting more hits than we did with the DPS or the FBI. And everybody was just kind of,
He said,
yeah, I have no idea.
he said FBI background checks are around 27% accurate, and then social security background check is more towards 70% accurate. And the FBI he said is more of a volunteer
I
system.
don't know.
That's what we just gotta find out.
What the man said.
That's right.
It kind of scares,
We're all like,
the shit out of me that only 27% accuracy on the FBI. What are the FBI doing?
But I mean, this is also based on like what a guy said in a meeting, right? So I'm not saying he's not credible, but we don't know anything more than that. So we can explore it.
but yeah, definitely explore it, yeah.
And it might be a statutory change, because I know right now our authority is tied to DPS and FBI.
Well, Chance has volunteered for you to do a social security check on him, okay?
That's fine. I have a full, I worked on Capitol Hill. I got a file. I'm good.
So part of this initiative is, let's not even worry about that part yet. Let's just get them written down and then we'll walk through. Okay, so explore social security check option. What else? We've got criminal history, background checks, discipline, complaints.
So the current process, the current mechanisms in place to catch those, for the most part, right?
You mean the criminal, the background?
Criminal, because you get them at the renewals and then you do the searches, right?
Is that
When they-
We have outbacks and we also check them at renewals.
Yeah. So there's two.
And I think the only on complaints is probably somewhere we need to track the advertising compliance complaints and how many are coming in and how many are resolved. I think that's something as staff, we just need to put on the enforcement, maybe just keep us apprised on that. I don't think we need a workshop on it, but I think see what the numbers are.
I think he put a qualifier in there that allows him to pull.
Good. Because 9 out of 11 right now.
I was under the impression that we had created a special code or something where we could track them, but.
We're tracking it manually right now.
Well, let's talk about that.
Tracking what manually? I'm sorry.
The advertising compliance complaints.
Okay, that's interesting. So we can look at that and provide updates, right? Sounds like you want periodic updates of what that's looking like. Are we seeing an increase? We are communicating it in the legal 1 and 2, so you may see an uptick. Okay, what else?
On enforcement.
I mean, if I did this poll online and everybody's like, it's saying that we need to make enforcement one of our initiatives or people don't think, and we've talked about this in so many meetings, that we're doing enough for enforcement. It's a
Okay.
slap on the wrist.
So we
What
need
is
to be
that?
harder.
Statutorily.
So we need to punish more.
Yeah, and I mean, we've gone back and looked at different orders and I don't know what was going on prior to here, but I was set that it was much stricter before. So, and that, I
So
mean,
is there consensus to draw a harder line, to be more heavy? Be heavier?
Heavy-handed.
More punishing.
My only issue with that is, was there malice, was there intent? And I think the way they go through the matrix and look at the way they respond, the way they furnish information, I think that plays into it. I really do.
We were talking about this at breakfast this morning. You know, if Gennaro had gotten up yesterday and taken accountability for screwing up,
The outcome might have been different.
30 years and 10,000 inspections and all that, and didn't have any problems in the past, it would have been a whole different look and feel to that hearing. But instead, he's like, nope,
Nope,
I
I would
always
do
walk
it again.
outside for 20 minutes and hang out.
I would do it the same way again.
Yeah. Which is not smart.
I mean, repeat
We'll see you
offenders.
here next time.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, all right, so let me break it down
My-
into, so we're talking straight discipline of license holders right now.
mhm.
So if there was one thing that I could make a comment on there, it would be, if you are a broker, and this is gonna beat a tree, but it doesn't really matter which tree it is, or dead horse or whatever. If you're a broker and somebody underneath your license screws up, you should be liable for that action.
In what way, civil or regulatory?
Regulatory.
Okay.
And you are.
And I'm gonna say it under the rent-a-broker thing, but I'm a broker in name only should never be a defense.
I
I
agree.
don't think it
No.
is.
I
I
agree.
don't think it is a defense.
But at the same time, if I'm a broker and I have established policies and procedures, and they do something outside of that, and it's unknown to me, I've done what I needed to do. So I mean, Bill Jones said,
Agreed.
you're only
go
responsible
rogue.
for your agent's authorized acts.
That's right.
And we totally got away from broker being any responsible. But now they were getting that, broker, if you did not have those policies and procedures, then it will go up to you. But if it's clear as day, you do not do this and they do it, yeah.
That's gonna
Which
be a
is
problem.
current practice.
And I see where you're
Which is
coming
best
from,
practice.
but yeah.
But I mean, it's like yesterday, we had a guy that flooded a house, which I've talked to other inspectors who flooded houses, they say it happens. But we have people doing much worse things, and they don't even get that kind of discipline.
So what's an example of that?
I have a whole spreadsheet, and I didn't bring it with me, but,
Just do one that you might be able to recall.
I mean, everybody's getting licensed, everybody's
Well, that's,
getting that,
that's
just
a
not
different.
licenses,
Yeah.
the discipline doesn't deter anything. It's so easy, like, okay, I'm gonna get probation for a year, but it's fully probated and I'm gonna pay you $500 and go about my day. What's that?
It sounds like, and tell me if you think this is productive, Leslie. What we use a penalty matrix, and the penalty matrix has broad range on a lot of things. We use aggravating and mitigating circumstances to determine where something falls on a penalty matrix. So that is the process that is used to basically apply what's worse or better than the next thing, right? It's spelled out. There's a lot of room for discretion on that. And there's a lot of, I bet however many people are in this room, there's different opinions about what's worse in terms of that type of crime. Do you hate drug crime? Do you hate, what is it that you've been affected by and that you think is the worst? But, I mean, do you want to look at the penalty matrix? Would that help you?
We've seen all that.
I'm just
We've
trying to
definitely
get to
broken
a,
it all down, but I mean, there's no deterrent. And literally, I posted up online, what do you think TREC's initiative should be? And everybody, there's several people saying the exact same thing.
but I don't know what that means in terms of what we do next. Like, what could we do? Like, enforcement isn't an initiative.
Who authors, or how are we, is this penalty matrix statutory, the way you do it, or is this done in-house?
It's a rule.
So it's both. So there's a statute that sort of sets out the factors that have to be considered, and then we have a rule that implements that.
But let's look at the
That's
inspector
the
yesterday.
Administrative penalties.
Yeah. Let's look at the inspector yesterday. Same thing happens when I'm an inspector. They file a complaint. I have made it right with the homeowner. I admit that I did not stay close enough to that bathtub. And they give me a $500 fine and tell me to take a 20-hour class. The same thing, I take no responsibility and I still don't think I'm responsible. I get a $2,000 fine. That's fair. Does that make sense? And I think that's where that penalty matrix comes in. You know, have you learned something from it? Have you not learned something from it? And I think you dig a little deeper in those that have not learned something from it because they just refuse to take responsibility.
But
I mean,
it was
even-
a reprimand that got his attention.
Right, yeah.
Well, we went for, I mean, we actually went for a
Suspension.
2 years
Suspension.
probate
And
suspension with
4,000.
30 days of that being essentially served
Out
and
of
the rest
business.
probated, right? So we lost.
Yeah.
But that is what we went for.
So if I look at these cases, and I can't see it real, like, some people didn't report a temperature difference and they used an expired form and had $600 in 8 hours. And then somebody used the wrong form and didn't report something on the foundation and got $600 in 10 hours. And then someone used the wrong form and failed to report something and got $1,600 in 12 hours.
On the wrong form, it's kind of interesting. Is it still right, Amay, that with every new edition of the form, like if they're outdated by 5 editions, for every one edition they're out, it's $100? Is that
I believe that's
give or
true.
take?
I don't really handle.
Import, yeah.
cases, so I
So-
think it's true.
I looked at one, approved of one yesterday or today that was using the wrong form, but it was just outdated by 1 form number. So it was $100 fine, but that was the only thing that was their only issue. Wow, $100. But it was,
That's what I think.
you know, the differences were minimal.
And then there was somebody who rummaged through somebody's doors and they got a reprimand in 500. Another person opened a drawer and touched items and got suspended 4 years, fully probated 4 years and 2,500.
Did they take that to SOA or did they take is it an agreed or? is
Yeah,
it
these
a-
are agreed
Agreed.
orders. So, I mean, a lot of those cases like depend on specific facts that may not be explicit in the order, you know? So, I mean, if you have questions about particular cases, we can always answer those. So
Right,
you
but
can
I mean,
understand where the
we're-
nuances come into play.
So I understand that, and yes, I would ask. But then there's people out there in our industry that are looking at this every day and going, these people aren't consistent
Okay,
because they
but
don't have that information.
But they have one side of the story.
Right,
That's
right.
easy to
So,
handle.
but why-
if there's a
but if-
solution to get that information out there.
I've never heard that.
Right,
Know
no.
what that is,
Because
so we
we
can make that
discussed this,
better.
if there's like fire cases or whatever, it needs to be put on there.
So I guess the question is there any consensus around y'all wanting us to look into like enforcement consistency? I mean, I know that that's something that Commissioner Lerner has, that it bothers you. It's okay.
The problem with that is, like I said, a lot of the cases are different. And it even boils down to the attitude of the respondent, right? Sometimes the respondent is very snooty and snarky and everybody
matters.
wants to, you know, take them to the ground
More
for
so.
the most that you can get, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they're contrite, they're remorseful, hey, I'm sorry I did, then you tend to go on the other scale, and so,
Right.
and then you've got facts and circumstances, and the cases
Evidence, is it
themselves, the
strong, is
evidence,
it
and so
not?
for somebody to say, well, this is the exactly similar case to this one, you're not gonna get the whole picture to be able to decide whether it was consistent or not. It just doesn't work that way. It's very difficult to manage something that way and apply the same standard. Judges apply different, in criminal cases for sentencing guidelines. They have discretion. And so I think not only that, then you've got different commissioners that come and go over time with different perspectives on how something should be handled. So you're going to get different inputs that drive somebody that doesn't like DWIs because their niece or nephew was killed by a drunk driver. Then you've got all those influences and inputs that decides what the ultimate disposition or penalty of a particular case. And try to be consistent, I don't think.
I mean, it's important for us to have a logic to what we do. So I guess my question is just, is there an initiative that comes out of this? Is there one? I mean, I want to be consistent too. I think there's so many nuances with that. I don't.
The question would be, how would you define it?
Yeah,
I think there's just a lot more than consistency, but it's obvious that nobody else does. I mean, people are running around out there doing everything. Nothing happens.
We need to make it easier to file a complaint, and hopefully the online complaint will help. We need to communicate that now there is an advertising compliance that you will get a letter or whatever. The first thing, the name is redacted. I mean, I'm surprised we haven't got more than 14 of
The name
those.
isn't redacted if you leave it on there.
No, the first letter to the
Respondent.
respondent, I don't remember which one I was.
I thought it was gonna be a call.
It is redacted. Yeah.
People don't wanna put their names on those things.
Yeah. But what I don't want to do is, and I'm not worried about consistent, I want to be fair.
Right.
I think there's a difference. What I don't want to do is like some of those things that the commission looks at every violation, every enforcement issue. No, I don't even want to.
I'm not sure you could.
Yeah.
I'm sure
You have to
you
quit
can.
your job.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can.
Okay,
We
so,
have more questions. I'll share my office on the day I'm not
No,
here.
I'm good.
but, I want to be mindful and make sure that the concerns are being put out there and the conversations are being had. Because, these were the answers. So we've got a discipline, we've got complaints, we've got background checks, and we've got criminal history. Is there anything of those? We haven't talked I know we've talked criminal history and background checks before, but it's up here. So is there an issue, a specific issue that you would want us to look at as it relates to that? Do you feel?
But so one of the things that and this comes back to reporting, this is purely administrative. On the enforcement aging, we get the one for that one period, and you kind of see the number 6 over there, and it kind of makes you wonder, it's like after, I don't know I think it's 1 or more years, it's like how long have those been there? And kind of like, are those like really, really old, or are they cycling in or out?
It's cycling. So, and I may have said that in our presentation yesterday, which is, she said, well, 3 of these are before you today. And then she said, and the others have actually settled since this report was created. But we could probably inform more of, I know you said that, but I think you could say, maybe give you the dates in that presentation in terms of like, we've got, I don't know, we could possibly provide more clarity in that report component. But I do remember her saying that part of like, well, okay, 3 of them are before you today, so that knocks out half, or I think it was 6 or 7. And then the other had already settled, the other 4 had settled.
Yeah, there were 7 in that category. Once we finish doing, our input, so those will be gone. And then the other 4 had already been closed before the meeting. So those reports were from September, right? So there's that lag between when the report was run and when we had the meeting.
So if you look at the chart, it goes like this, right?
Yeah.
So the cases that are coming down this way are clearing out, right? You don't have anything that's really, really old in there.
No.
Okay.
No.
And if I understand it correctly, usually the age is SOA dependent as well, because, people ask for extensions, and they're usually the cases that have gone all the way to the top, which are harder to control.
Yeah, because they delay and.
Well, yeah, and it just, it takes a while.
We have to set those, initially we have to set those like 90 days out. And then they may get continued, and then we have to wait on the decision. And then we have to wait for the next commission meeting for that decision to be considered. So it does stretch those cases out considerably.
And so I think also informs the discipline process. Like the PFDs we get are indicative of where SOA is headed. They've got the same directive from the governor, if not more directive, I think, in a lot of ways, in terms of reducing barriers to entry and getting folks licensed. I know that discipline's a little bit different on that, but just knowing that when they make their cases, when an enforcement attorney gets a case, it's similar to any prosecutor. They've got to look at their evidence. They've got to look at their judges, which is SOA, where they're tending to go. They batted for the probated suspension with 30 days. They didn't get it. So that's not to say you run scared, but I think you run informed, right? But if there's anything else, we've got this. Is there anything else that we want to talk about or look at as it relates to enforcement? This is our last, unless anyone's gonna throw out a new initiative right now. Then we'll do a little bit of just a quick review to make sure we got it all.
Yeah, do the review. The only thing I want to add is I sure would like communications on the subject to contracts. Brokers, we're getting a lot of them.
So many.
And it's very dangerous.
Yes.
I mean, I used to kind of laugh at it. Now I'm like,
That's
wow,
not funny.
we're getting 3 a week.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
And we can receive feedback from you all too throughout the year. If like, the chair said, this has popped up very recently. So what we've got, because we did have an item that was communications, like keeping communications moving forward and in the direction they've been going. So what do we want to raise awareness about in this coming year? So we've got business entity registration. We've got the IABS, especially as, that's important. It can be used as a tool, and with SB 510, it seems like a good discussion point. We've got advertising rules. We just talked about that. And then we've got subject to contracts.
No more will come up.
Let's add advertising compliance, complaints.
Okay.
I mean, more we can make that, the better.
Okay. And we can do that with articles, and we can do that with speaking events, and we do that with course books. Like we've got the tools. So this doesn't have to be the final list. We're open to receiving more. I mean, if you're seeing things that, we know the land fraud's up, we can write articles on that. Just whatever you're seeing is really helpful for us because we're not out there. All right. So that is everybody.
Yeah.
So we got eliminate paper, broker succession. We've got those 2 broker associate items. We've got clarification advertising requirements, and to likely include something at the workshop. We've got social security checks. And then and those communications ones that we just talked about.
All right. Our next agenda item is potential workshop. You are going to dig a little bit deeper in the.
You got probably plenty in there.
In the rules and regulating broker associates relationships and affiliations. I would like to leave maybe February open for that, and or maybe one of these others, and maybe executive kind of scrub it and then see if we need to move it on, or if it's just something we can give information on. Does that make sense?
So broker responsibility left it as they were pretty much looking into all these items that we crossed off. What is their goal at this point?
They're going to meet when? January. The affiliation of broker associates and the disciplinary actions that we will look at. Y'all bring us information back on that for the December executive meeting, and then that might end up going to BRAC.
Okay,
or a workshop.
in a long term,
Yeah.
but I think what, Commissioner Lerner is saying is, those were the items that the BRWG had recommended
Okay,
to the BRAC, which I think you're right, that some of that will still end up landing there depending on where it heads, because they look at legislative changes too.
exactly.
But if there are specific areas of broker responsibility that this commission wants them to address, you can let them know that. We've had it where we met with the chairs of the committees to say, hey, this is what, there's a specific interest in broker agent relationship. That's the one that I remember. With that new group, we can also ask them, in a survey beforehand, like what are the issues that you're seeing and that you want to talk about as a group, and do a little bit of something like this of like, okay, well, let's lay it out. And I think that's how we initially started the BRWG. And we'll still tell them, hey, these were the recommendations that came out of the group. Here's where it landed as in the workshop, and what do what, if anything, maybe they've got a whole other issue with broker associates that we haven't talked about. I don't know.
I mean, some people were also talking about the broker sponsorship requirements, or being a sponsoring broker.
Right, the having different requirements as it relates to broker sponsoring other than broker responsibility course, right?
Yeah.
I thought that they ultimately landed that they want everyone to take, not everyone, but all the brokers to take the BRC class in order to get their license.
They have to.
In the renewal period prior to,
Yeah, it was the real estate brokerage. It was a real estate
Yeah,
brokerage course.
Right, they require the 30-hour real estate brokerage.
Every 2 years.
Already,
Right.
The BRC.
but the BRC is the 6-hour, that's every 2 years.
CE.
Would we take that?
Your
in?
responsibility. Then you, only brokers do, or.
If you're
Because it would be
sponsoring,
prior,
it doesn't
prior to
Yeah,
getting, prior
Yeah.
to getting broker's license.
Oh,
You're
okay.
sponsoring, yeah,
Yeah.
so,
Okay.
but we can keep up those conversations and. All right.
Okay. I don't want to open this can of worms again, but I really want y'all to think about that DBA. It might be easier for the broker just to, it was done so people knew who you were advertising for. That was the whole intent of registering the DBA. So either we put it on staff to confirm the DBA, or we say they're doing business ads without the attestment. I mean, I'm gonna have to really wrap my brain around that, but it was done for advertising.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't think if you're holding out as XYZ Realty, whether it's registered or not, as long as TREC knows that you're holding out as X,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. So.
Right? And I know the rule says you should
Yeah.
have, but I think you're enforcing, it's
But
like,
it's
she asked the-
unenforceable,
she said the
then-
question is what's the benefit of what is the public what are we trying to protect the public from?
And it's advertising.
No, on enforcing
Yeah.
that they didn't register.
Yeah, I mean, as long as TREC's got it, then they can access it and be aware, I guess, and whether it's.
The name.
Yeah, the
Whether
name.
they register it or not.
Well, that's what I'm
I
saying,
don't
whether
care.
it's
I wanna
registered
know.
with the Secretary of State. I mean,
I mean, in the
That's
new
it.
database, can't you just upload this stuff for the file?
But then
It's gonna be
who's,
cloud-based?
who's looking, like,
I mean, if you just have them upload it, that's some sort of compliance. I mean, they have to upload it in there, and they think that TREC has it and it's gonna do something with it.
is the assumed name different? Well, we can talk about what we can dig into it, but I'm remembering that being
Alright.
different than.
Thank you. I know we got out 3 hours early from what Chelsea said, 4:30. So,
they're 4 hours or
I said 5:30.
5:30.
Great. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
all right.
You
Thank
can
y'all.
go.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks, Scott.
You don't stop recording.
Take care.